Okay. Welcome, one and all. We are live for yet another episode of WIC TV, a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious, and we have a show for you tonight. We are still waiting on some guests. Hopefully they will show up, but time waits for no man, and we're doing it with what we got. It'll be great. Today's topic is going to be the Olympics, specifically women's boxing and women's sports in general. Imane Khelif, and apologies if I mispronounce the name, recently came under controversy after they beat one of their competitors, the Italian competitor, in a boxing match in under a minute. Some accusations were leveled. That's run the gamut from her being trans to her having DSD to her being actually a man. I don't know. We don't know. There's a lot of conflicting evidence on this. But I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about genetic anomalies being allowed to compete in sporting events and things like that. And we've had some guests on. Oh, we got one more. Okay. We've almost got the full group now. Thanks for being here. Yeah. And we're just going to talk about it. And we have some great guests to talk about it with. So I'll give everyone some time to introduce themselves and tell us their initial thoughts. And let's start with Danielle, please.
Okay.
Give us what you think.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I have been on WIC's show before, so thank you for having me on again. me.
Give it a minute. You started breaking up. Try that again. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, my headphones didn't connect all the way. So yeah, my name's Daniela Pensack, and my thoughts on this issue is a little bit mixed. I guess it just depends on the details of the case. As far as I'm aware, um, Iman is not necessarily confirmed to have XY chromosomes. But as far as the IBA is concerned in their reporting of it, it seems to be the case that they do have XY chromosomes, and if that is the case, although I haven't seen the evidence actually put out there, Iman hasn't done a public chromosomal testing that we are aware of to know exactly what's going on there. So I've seen reports online saying that they were born a female, and if that is the case, they do not have an unfair advantage. But if they certainly do have XY chromosomes, like the IBA stated that they do, I think that they certainly do have an unfair advantage. They shouldn't have competed in that. And then as far as like genetic abnormalities are concerned, considering that they are so limited, but given saying that there are individuals that do have genetic abnormalities that concern the chromosomes, I am at a loss to say what exactly should be done with that, whether they should have their own league or not, depending on how that manifests in their body. But I believe that a person that has the chromosomes they're born with, whether it's XX or XY, should be competing in that designated sex. So only individuals with XX chromosomes should have competed in that boxing match. And if Iman does not have that, they shouldn't have competed, and they certainly do have an unfair
Okay.
advantage.
We got one more coming. I had to replace someone, but they'll be backstage in a minute, and I'll just slot them in when they get here. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate you. Looking forward to the discussion that we have today. Chris Speaks, please go ahead. Introduce yourself, give us your opening thoughts, and we'll get into it.
Hi, I'm Chris. I will leave talking about myself for sort of the closing statements, but in terms of what I believe on the issue specifically, then to the best of my understanding, as of August 5th, we have no conclusive evidence that Khelif is even intersex, let alone trans. We can speculate on the former, but even then we enter kind of shoddy grounds. We do know that she's competed as a woman since she was 19. We have a picture of her as a little girl, and we know that being trans is illegal in Algeria, and we know that she's within the limits, including the testosterone limits, to partake in the current Olympics. If she is intersex, we have no idea what this means in practice, as intersex people need to be evaluated on a sort of individual one-by-one level. As we're talking about ranges of what can potentially mean, from like having testicles to it literally not showing itself in any way, to a point where a woman having DSD can give regular pregnancy, never having found out about the fact that she has DSD. What we do have, on the other hand, is the International Boxing Association, which is a notoriously corrupt organization that was kicked out of the International Olympics Committee due to a lack of transparency regarding their procedures and funding over the years. A decision that they tried to appeal and then they lost the appeal of. IBA, to put it bluntly, sucks Putin's cock at every step of the way and is primarily funded by Russia, being one of, if not the only, to my understanding, internationally recognized organization that still allows Russian participants to fight under their own national flag. This organization kicked Imane Khelif out of the competition under the guise of having done a confidential but totally legit, trust me guys, genetics test that they initially didn't want to give any details of, have since clarified that those were blood tests. Right after Imane just happened to have defeated a Russian competitor, not at the start of the competition, but in the middle of it. There is an actual trans competitor in the current Olympics, and the fact that this individual isn't being spoken of kind of indicates how performative a lot of the outrage is. But I mean, to each their own. If anyone wants to have a conversation about whether Olympics in general should allow intersex or trans competitors, or what the current testing criteria is, then we can have that conversation. I'm more than happy to do that. But we will have that conversation after a thorough concession regarding everything I just mentioned about both Khelif and the IBA. At best, we're looking at a case of two different understandings of what constitutes an unfair advantage in sports, and at worst, and this is way more likely, we're looking at an active Russian disinformation campaign. I will personally sooner blow my own father through a plastic straw than take the word of Fatnik scum about, well, frankly, anything.
You scared me for there. We are on Twitch, so let's keep it Twitch legal, gang. Okay, let's keep it toss friendly.
Blowjobs out within TOS.
Well, when you said you were gonna blow your, I didn't know what the next words were gonna be.
Jesus Christ, calm down, okay? The fucking Trump parades are
Chris,
over, okay?
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. We'll see how it goes. Next up, Bronwyn, please. tell people who you are, your initial thoughts, and we'll get it from there.
My name is Bronwyn. I mostly am just concerned about the level of social media outrage or whatnot that has happened against Imane. With, like we've said, like the very lack of any concrete evidence and the number of like people or whatnot basically just bashing this poor woman who, as far as any proof or evidence goes, has done absolutely nothing wrong. We can always tell people, like, just say, oh yeah, it's absolutely a man. I mean, as far as my initial thoughts go, one thing I can say with almost complete certainty is she is not a trans man. We have, like, that's the one thing we have, like, documented evidence of, is that, like, she was born a woman, raised a woman, has lived her life as a woman. There was no transition whatsoever. As far as being intersex, that is still unclear. Nobody has put forth actual evidence of that. And I feel like a lot of people who think they're helping by stating that she's intersex instead of trans are still spreading misinformation because it hasn't actually become concrete that she is intersex. And it's heartbreaking when people are like, oh yeah, absolutely, this totally looks like a man, when for all they know, it could be 100% a woman. And it's just really sad. Also, I can say with almost 100% certainty, I guarantee she does not have a penis. That probably would have been spotted earlier on. So anybody posting pictures of like circling like a bulge in her shorts, or the fact that she's wearing groin protection and calling that evidence, is hilarious, because it's just ridiculous.
You heard it here first. First gang, Bronwyn confirms they do not have a penis. Thank you for your confirmation. We're entering it into the record. We'll go forward from there. Next up, we have someone who has been kind enough to jump on a little last minute. I don't know where Mark is. Hopefully he's okay. But Jeb Tan has graciously agreed to jump on and state his case. I've seen him arguing about it in my various group chats and things like that. So I'm glad to have you, Jeb Tan. Give us what you got, please.
Yeah, so I struggle with this conversation because, I think Bronwyn was reasonably, measured in her response. But with people like Chris Speaks, who say it in the most smug tone and say, I need a comprehensive concession of everything I've said because I'm just so well learned on the topic, while demonstrating they know nothing about sports, probably didn't know what the IBA was a week ago, definitely didn't know what the IOC's guidelines were leading into this, definitely has no idea how this testing is usually done or how it's publicized. Because the idea that there's no evidence that they have anything anomalous with their biology is wrong. They have about as much evidence as you will ever get in sport about anomalous sex characteristics because it's private medical information, and most of the time it cannot be shared. The highest level of evidence you can have generally is a ban from a major organization based on testing. The reason being, while the IBA has struggled with corruption in terms of judging, they've never had any corruption controversies with their sex testing. Trust me, we would know, right? It would be all over Twitter by now. Other times they've done this. Never been the case. And that's because they have their testing, their sex testing specifically, which is the only testing they do, because most organizations don't do their own PED testing, including the IBA. They have it verified by third-party labs. And while it can't be publicized, it can be provided to the CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which they are subject to voluntarily and pay to be subject to, so that athletes can give their appeals to the CAS in Switzerland to challenge corrupt Russian decisions. That's why they tend to do their corruption through judging, because you can't appeal a judge's decision. A boxing judge's decision, to clarify the difference for people who aren't used to hearing about sports. And there are two athletes that got banned by the IBA. One of them doesn't get mentioned because they didn't just beat a Russian and they didn't appeal. They are also Lin Yuting of Taiwan. She is also has clinched a medal already in the Olympics because the Olympics doesn't regulate any of this stuff. And neither of them followed through with the appeal process that they're entitled to. Imane was shown the results of her test and withdrew her appeal. Now, we don't know what order those things happened in, but we do know now that both athletes got to see their test, and neither of them followed through with an appeal process that would have been completely outside of Russia and completely detached from any Russian influence, and they didn't do it. So there's a lot of information left out. I'm sure we can get more into the nitty-gritty about PED testing and sex testing once the Open starts, but that's my opening statement for now. Most likely, Imane and Lin Yuting both did flag for anomalous sex issues. We're never going to see the explicit details because they have expressly requested that the IBA not release that information. So
okay, well, thank you for being here, and with that, let's kind of get into the opening. And I'll start with this question, right? If, as alleged, they did have an anomalous test, is that in and of itself enough for you to make sure that they shouldn't compete in the sport? Like, to you, Chris, specifically, and to you, Bronwyn, assuming that they did actually fail whatever test this is the IBA did, right, the sex test or whatever, should they be allowed to compete in Olympic sports? Go ahead.
Yeah, do you want me to go first, Bronwyn? Do you want to go first?
I guess I can just I think it just goes with as it stands now, they should be allowed to compete because they didn't fail whatever tests it is that the Olympics committee themselves put forward. They had been cleared for eligibility, so they can go forward and continue to compete. Now, I think going forward, I think the Olympics will definitely be changing their plans or their method of testing and stuff like that. But as the IOC president mentioned before, like part of his problem with the IBA testing is that they changed their criteria for eligibility partway through the already active competition, which, like, I mean, that just seems unfair at best. So I think for this current competition, then they should just be allowed to continue to compete because they've already passed the eligibility criteria. But going forward, I think if there is an intersex issue, I think then the Olympics need to make sure they put into place testing for that. And I think, unfortunately, like, it becomes a very gray area, but unfortunately, I think they would have to prevent anybody who is intersex from competing in the women's division.
Okay, Chris, please.
Yeah, so as I was sort of saying earlier, when it comes to intersex individuals, the issue that you have is that they have to be judged on a very case-by-case basis because they might have some sports advantages that might come as a result of many things that, for instance, give men the advantage in sports as a product of going through male puberty, and they might have none at all, and fall within every single norm that is active for cis women. And that's one of the reasons why these organizations moved away and withdrew from doing DNA tests, I believe in 99. And this is sort of why we also have other testing criteria, such as testosterone levels in blood and the limits there. Testosterone seems to be the sort of best or most scientifically valid way of measuring how much of a sports advantage you can have. And that's why we have testosterone limits for, well, all Olympics participants, including the boxers that we're talking about here.
Yeah, so here's my problem with it is you're right. They stopped doing sex testing, had nothing to do with the sex testing being suspect. It had to do with them not wanting to do it anymore, and they announced why, which is they wanted to get more intersex and trans athletes included in sports. Their testosterone requirements are fucking laughable. Their testosterone threshold that you need to meet to be able to compete with females is about 5 times higher than the average high-performing athlete.
International Olympics Committee. You're referring
the
to,
International
right?
Olympics Committee,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
And you only have to be at that testosterone threshold for a year prior, which means you can have absolutely ridiculous levels of testosterone beforehand. You can be actively juicing now with testosterone because of the way that they've done this up to a year out, and then modulate it a year in. And because they allow intersex and trans athletes to compete, they won't even hit you for the substances that private sports organizations will hit you for that prove that you were juicing out of competition, because those compounds are often needed for gender transition because they're hormone suppressants. So a lot of times when athletes in other sports get dinged for steroids, they actually get caught with metabolites for things like Klonopin or other hormone suppressants that they're using to hide the fact that they were on bioidentical testosterone prior, But now, if you want trans and intersex athletes to compete, which the IOC has admitted they do, you can't hit them for those, because then you're basically disqualifying every trans athlete that uses them to modulate their hormones. So you end up with an unfair competition no matter what. And the IOC has made it even more unfair than it ever had to be by having a testosterone threshold so ridiculously high and not testing for it at least 4 years out. You're on a 4-year event schedule. No, they chose to do it a year out. So right after this Olympics, Imane Khelif could be a biological woman juicing, just out of her mind, juicing testosterone for the next 3 years and then stop and then be good to go to compete the next year. It's ridiculous.
I also want to add that I don't even think testosterone level testing should be, present, because testosterone levels, from what I understand it definitely changes, or it's different from woman to woman. If I'm not mistaken, I found a case online just before this debate where they found women from an African country had much higher testosterone, which they were overqualified. They couldn't even qualify to compete in female sports because they just have naturally higher levels of testosterone. And I wouldn't
Is this
think
woman
that.
named Caster?
I forgot the name.
Caster Semenya, maybe?
Perhaps.
A sprinter? Yeah, it's. I'm sorry, you can finish because I don't want to jump in. I want
think
to
she's
jump in, but I
referring to
don't
the
want
more
to.
recent two, not Castor, because Castor was in the 90s. There was another 2 athletes that got disqualified in the last
There
summer
was two.
Olympics.
There was
Yeah.
2, right? But at any rate, I don't even know if testosterone should even be a consider. I'm sure there are benefits to it, but from what I understand, I would say that chromosomal testing is at least far more accurate, considering that women do have much different distributions of testosterone from other women.
So you would be, just to be clear, you'd be for getting rid of a testosterone test and putting in a chromosomal test.
Correct.
Chromosomal, is that how you say that word? Okay.
I think so. And from what I understand, there are like 4 major ways to test. There's testosterone level testing, chromosomal testing, just basic physical examinations, and visual inspections. The first initial 3, I think, or the visual, physical, and chromosomal testing, I think would be fine. At least as far as I understand, testosterone just seems to be. It just isn't. It doesn't seem to apply very much if you consider that there's different distributions of testosterone among women.
Do I want to address a lot of that?
You went robot, buddy.
Oh.
Uh-oh. They got him, gang. The
No.
Russians, they
No.
did it. They came in hot and took him out. Here, let's bring him back and see if he's better now. Hello?
Hello.
Okay, better. Great. Give us what you were saying before Russia got you.
Sorry. So for starters, Caster Semenya specifically, she wasn't in the 90s. I think the last race that she ran, or the year she was disqualified, was 2019. So that would be number one. And if that is the case, then who you're talking about here would be Caster Semenya. The reason why she has too high of a testosterone in her body is because of something called, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but it's 5A reductase 2 deficiency, which comes as a result of her being intersex, and it makes her produce so much testosterone that in order for her to be bumped down to the required threshold, she has to take artificial like chemicals to bring her down to that level, and even then she struggled to do that. So she is a good example of someone who is intersex, but that by itself doesn't exclude them from competition, is the fact that she can't meet other thresholds. Another thing that I wanted to talk about
it should disqualify her from competition because she has Caster Semenya had functioning internal testes producing testosterone. She had male genitalia giving
and
her
she's
male
disbarred.
advantages. She wasn't for a while. She's got 2 gold medals in the Olympics. So
yeah, she wasn't disbarred until they found out what's going on. Yeah.
So that's kind of the reason why the IOC should have stronger criteria for athletes going in, so that someone with testicles doesn't steal 2 gold medals from female athletes, whether knowingly or unknowingly.
I think this is an important point. Intersex.
There were like
athletes,
6 other things I wanted to address, though.
Sure, but let me get this out, and then I'll give the ball to you, and you can address them. Intersex athletes, should they be allowed to participate in women's sports at all? Right? And do we, for no fault of their own, simply be how they were born, should they be barred from competing in an event? That feels wrong to me. But
outside of anomalous situations like Swire syndrome, where they don't actually receive an advantage from it, I would say 100% yes, and it would be their duty to prove.
What's the difference between that and someone born abnormally tall?
Because we don't protect women's sports because men are taller than women. We protect women's sports because men have a biological advantage coming from their male sex characteristics. So their testicles, sometimes not, their chromosomes don't usually have anything direct to do with it. It's a proxy that the other things within their body are going to behave a certain way. But generally, yeah, if your testosterone production is that of a male, that is why we have women's sports, is to protect women from male advantages.
That's also why we have testosterone tests, though. If someone like Caster Semenya wanted to run in the 2024 Olympics, she wouldn't have been able to because she can't bring her test levels down to the sufficient enough level that they require you to have it at.
She actually could. So the current threshold they have, she had tested under a couple different times. She probably was taking different pharmaceuticals later on, but the current threshold, Caster Semenya would probably meet, but she's 33 years old and wouldn't.
What did she test at?
I think I remember her being in like the 190s in nanograms per deciliter. I don't remember because they do nanomoles per liter.
Well, 190 would be what, 19 nanomoles per liter? No. That would put a 9
No.
above the...
Hold on. Let me go into the conversion, baby.
Okay, while they're doing that, what other things did you want to address?
Yeah, so there was one thing that was said that the reason why they moved away from these DNA tests wasn't because they were sus. That's just blatantly incorrect. They moved away from those in 1999, and they moved away from those because there was already at that point a number of controversies that are to do with those historical exams. So like you've had, for instance, the International Association of Athletics Federation that would send female athletes to hospitals to have measurements and palpitations of clitoris and vagina and labia done, as well as evaluating breast size and pubic hair scored on an illustrated 5-grade scale. I imagine we'd have better tests today, but there was a shitload of controversy to do with those. There was also a Polish athlete that used to be, she was an incredibly...
No, hold on.
Yeah.
They tested for pubic hair and breast size?
Yeah, basically they had a 5-point scale, and
not the Olympics, one specific country. So the Olympics could have just adopted their own test, but instead they opted for not requiring sex testing because, again, they were prioritizing getting more people in the competition over female athlete safety.
It's also because they had controversies to do with that in the past. There was another controversy to do with a Polish sprinter called Ewa Kubowska, who she was looked at. People have determined that she looks too much of a man, just like the dude who was going to be here on the panel today but didn't show up, claimed that there is evidence that Lin Yu Ting has high testosterone because of a large larynx as observed on the Twitter photo he uploaded. And she was, lo and behold, again beating Russian competitors, and she got disqualified and all of her records cancelled and scrubbed because the medical experts from Kiev, who at the time was under the USSR sort of control, determined that she is too much of a man to compete. So there were absolutely controversies to do with these genetic testings, and they moved away from them, partially because of that, and partially because of what you yourself admitted 2 minutes ago, which is when you said that chromosomes themselves don't really have anything to do with it, the sort of external things that come as a result.
So now I'm going to get you on two things because you've warped two things. One, the IBA is not under control by Kiev. They're not. They're actually under more control.
I never said they are.
You just did.
Nope, I didn't. I was talking about Ewa Kubowska, which is a historical Polish sprinter, and I've mentioned the USSR.
No, you also
IBA didn't exist during the USSR.
You just talked about Lin Yu Ting from this year and said that the medical doctors under the like whatever of Kiev.
Do you want me to repeat yourself and give you a chance to listen to this time instead of reading something on the second monitor and then just responding to something I didn't say?
I didn't say XY chromosomes had nothing to do with it. This is part of everybody who talks about this subject as smugly as you do. Does this?
I'm literally quoting you, by the way.
No, I did not say XY chromosomes have nothing to do with it.
No, you said verbatim, chromosomes don't have anything to do with it.
I said they don't directly have anything to do with male advantages. They serve as an accurate proxy for what is going on inside someone's body. If you actually think that is me saying XY chromosomes have nothing to do with male advantages, you're either a liar or an idiot.
Okay.
So if they serve as a proxy, then you'd admit that it is perfectly within the realm of possibility for someone to be intersex and not have any advantages that come as a result of that, because that proxy simply hasn't activated in the threshold that you'd require it to. That's why also we have other kinds of testing when it comes to the Olympics.
Yes, with no proxies are perfect, but XY chromosomes are a very good proxy.
Okay, let's get
also to clarify what we were talking about earlier. Caster Semenya's 190 nanograms per deciliter would be 6.5 nanomoles per liter. The current threshold for the Olympics is 10. So she could.
It has been 10 for ages, I want to say.
They announced 10 about 2-3 years ago. I think before it was 10 for the last Olympics, and then they announced it right afterward, which they did because they knew it would piss people who knew anything about sports off wildly, because it is an insane threshold for women, because the average like high performing female would be lucky to have like 40 to 50 nanograms per deciliter, and we're talking about a threshold that allows for up to 288 nanograms per deciliter, so over 5 times that.
Okay. You also said something interesting, Chris, that I want to ask everyone about, especially Bronwyn, because she mentioned that's one of the reasons she wanted on, is the amount of transvestigating, or people who have been posting pictures of this Olympic athlete and saying, well, look at the bulge in her shorts, or look at her what was the larynx, the oversized larynx and things like that. And this has to mean
I can find you the exact tweet, but
you know what I mean? But we can imagine that there's
a
lot
of that
different
going
things.
around.
Right. So I guess what are some of our thoughts on the way that this has been litigated and made into a cultural war issue online? And I want to hear from Bronwyn first. I want to go to Danielle, and then we can get everyone in. Go ahead, Bronwyn.
Oh, jeez. First off, you promised me there wouldn't be yelly people on here.
Jeb Tan was last minute.
Yeah, as far as he knew, there wasn't going to be yelly people on here, and then I showed up.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But shoot, where was I going with that? It comes from the misinformation. It comes from the rumors that start based on, like I said, these people that take like this minuscule amount of whatever might have been posted, like the president of the IBA says they failed their gender tests or whatever, and then everybody's like, oh, therefore they must be trans. They must have been born a man. They have a penis. That like there is such like a gray area. There is so many other things that could be going on, but nobody turns on their critical brain for like 2 seconds to like even do like a minuscule Google search. Like, I'll admit, like, I am not a leading expert in the genetic testings or like whatever testings they do for any of the sports and that kind of stuff. But even like the minuscule amount of Googling you can do, you realize that there isn't actually this like, oh yes, they clearly like got tested and they have the XY chromosome, they have the DSD genetic disorder going on. Like right now, it's like you said, there's like, you can probably speculate that yes, there is something suspicious going on in their gender tests. That's, a given. But for everybody to immediately jump to, oh, they're a trans athlete and this is the Olympics way of like, trying to do some sort of woke blah, blah, blah bullshit that usually happens with these kind of culture wars is just crazy. Like, even like I said, even the ones that like think they're trying to help, when they're like, oh no, like they're not trans, they have this genetic disorder. It's like, you don't even have evidence of that yet. And then that starts all new rumors and then starts hate on those people. And unfortunately there are like, it's a very rare disorder, but I think somebody said 1 in 80,000. But then there are all these other XY chromosome DSD people who have lived their lives as women watching these bigots or whatever you want to call them tear down Imane Khelif for like how she looks, how she dresses, like look at this is her training, like obviously this is a man, and like they don't want to be seen that way, especially if like this could potentially be, she may have never even known until like the IBA or whatever did their genetic testing. And imagine trying to deal with that whilst the entire world is basically telling you you're an uggo. Is heartbreaking.
Okay. Responses to that, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. As far as like people sharing and saying like Logan Paul, those tweets with this is a male, shouldn't be competing with females, that I'm like, I'll attribute that to misinformation. But the kind of posts you guys are hinting at, I haven't seen the exact one that Chris was talking about, but the deep transvestigation of look at how she dresses, look at she was wearing this belt, and look at her Adam's apple. That's worse to me. That's not misinformation. That's people who also don't care about women's sports that just want to bully trans people.
That's people who don't care about women in general.
Yeah, they just want to bully trans people. They want to bully, and they're okay with bullying women too. And so they don't really care what she is, because either way, they're just trying to bully for the big Adam's apple, and it's sort of like a more insidious version of those pedo hunters that just meet dudes in the mall and just so they can slap them in the face and put them on video and then never talk to the police ever. It's like they've found a place where they can be righteously bullies to somebody, and so to them, they're jumping on this bandwagon of people concerned for women's safety and using it as a vehicle to bully people, and it's pretty gross. I don't think misinformation has a whole lot to do with that group. I think it's genuine malice.
Okay.
I don't even... Malice is... For sure, maybe with some of these actors, I just think that most of them are fucking retarded. Like, at the end of the day, it basically goes like this. If the woman is not conventionally attractive, and I seem to care about this topic right now because of some Russian disinformation, then there is a 75% chance it's a man. If she wears a groin guard, it's because she has a dick. If she's scratching her thigh, that is because there's a dick stuck to it. Like, it's just, people on the internet are weird. They've always been weird, to be fair, but it's just, it gets worse. It gets worse because everyone suddenly wants to make this about trans issues when we literally have... We have no evidence of her being trans whatsoever, and we seem to have a decent chunk of things now that are proving that she isn't, because we literally have pictures of her as a kid.
Yeah, trans seems very unlikely, and the groin guard thing. Like, as someone in combat sports, protective equipment like that is just, it's optional. Some dudes don't even wear mouth guards. Then there's some dudes who wear headgear, mouth guards, shin pads, elbow pads, even when they're only boxing. Like, it's personal preference, and as far as female genitalia, there's a lot of variance. There's a lot of different shapes and sizes of what goes on down there. And for some women, the sensitive parts are a little bit more exposed, and they want to use a groin guard because, yeah, if you're boxing, you get hit below the belt and you've got the head of whatever structure you've got down there exposed. That shit's going to hurt. So it doesn't mean that someone is trans because they wear a groin guard. It's ridiculous. I've fought with many women who...
How many women have you boxed?
How many have you beaten?
I couldn't count. I've beaten some. I've been beaten by many in sparring. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, people wear different protection because sparring is sparring. The whole point is for you to practice and not get hurt. So.
Okay.
There's also an angle to this that is always interesting whenever this starts happening, because people talking about how if Trump gets reelected, then this is never going to happen again, because somehow the president of the United States has a say on how the Olympics are run is just so inherently interesting. Because you could literally Google her name, you could find out where she's from, and you could find out that she, like, after like a 2-minute Google search, what could we find out? She has been competing for the last decade. There are pictures of her as a kid. She has officially competed since she was 19. It's illegal to be transgender in Algeria. It's illegal to transition there. You can't have your passport gender changed. Bro.
Yeah, and
fucking give me a break.
I want to hear from Danielle a little bit.
I was going to ask, amid this controversy, has Imane actually come out and clarified the situation themselves? I mean, can they not themselves provide a
She
test
said
result?
She's a woman, I believe.
She just said she's female, yeah.
She's female, and she's
female.
a woman, and she's winning for women. She's always been a woman, and she always will be a woman.
Okay,
Something that is like, if you want to take it as like as good faith as possible, then she's just a woman. But at the same time, if you're like a schizo fucking running deep into the conspiracy theories, then you could just not believe her, and like you could make the same argument that you made before.
I want to hear what Daniela has to say about this, but so go on.
Well, I mean, there just seems to be a position, just two positions here, whatever the IBA says and then whatever Imane says. I mean, they claim to have the results saying that they have XY chromosomes, but the IBA does. But they can't, as far as I'm aware, they can't actually like show that, correct?
Yeah, they actually just came out in a press conference either late yesterday or early today, where they said they've expressly received letters from the representatives from both Lintu and Khelif that them reiterating their lack of consent, like proactively ensuring they know that they do not have consent to release the test results.
Gotcha. I mean, then I would imagine that Imane can themselves just do it and then reveal it to the public, just to So,
they
and they-
have
and they
privilege
don't.
over all that information.
But
But not only did she not, she also told the IBA they can't. And she got halfway through the arbitration process. She got into the pretrial of the arbitration process and then withdrew it, which throws us. What did she see? What did the IBA have to provide the CAS that made her not want to appeal anymore?
I want to hear what Daniela thinks she saw. Why do you think she canceled her appeal process? Because
that's what I want to know. Because I'm not gonna sit here and say that they're a male or a female because I just don't know. They claim they were born a female. I mean, we can just go off of that. But if this is a conversation to consider what actually they are and what versus what the IBA says, and if the IBA has or they claim to have results stating that it's an XY, I don't really have anything else to go off of, right? So unless Imane themselves provides their own results, then I suppose that would satiate at least some of the controversies that we've been seeing online. And as far as the transvestigating that's been going on, I think that's also ridiculous. I mean, that's just everyone's gonna make an issue of anything these days. So but that's not the part I'm really concerned about. I'm just so much concerned about what Imane is. I mean, we can go off of what they're saying they were born a female, but there just seems to be two very differing opinions here as to what's going on or what's actually happening there.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that when it comes to specifically her withdrawal of it, you have a lot happening, sort of many different angles to consider. So for starters, the withdrawal could have come from above her. It could have been the Algerian government trying to get her not to go through with it. I will say it is somewhat sus that she started the process and then withdrew from the process. You also have the consideration right now that with the current political climate, imagine that it came out that she is in fact intersex and then she has no advantages that come as a result of that. Do you think anyone at all would care about the fact that it comes with no advantages? Do you think anyone would want her to do further tests, or anyone would care that she's within the limits sort of put on her by the IOC? No one really would give a fuck, right? At that point, it's sort of just game over, even though she's literally within the limits.
We know she's within the limits of the IOC because they have very loose limits. But I think that's kind of my point with all of this is the IOC needs stricter limits. They need to not have activist limits. They need to have actual limits meant to keep women safe and stop trying to talk out of both sides of their mouth, where in all of their press releases, everything you see is about respecting the gender on people's passports, respecting trans and intersex identities. There's very little there in terms of proactively protecting the safety of their female athletes. That seems like a played out concept to them.
On that note specifically, to my understanding, the IOC doesn't actually enforce the limits. That's left up to the individual bodies that are in charge of the given event. So the current Paris boxing unit decided to go with the same regulations that I believe were there for the Tokyo events and the events that were before that. But the next Olympics are not going to be held by the Paris boxing unit. And if the next Olympics that are being held by a different organization want to, for instance, go back to doing DNA testing, I don't believe there's anything within the IOC that would forbid them from doing so.
Well,
I would assume they'd be against
their unilateral ability to throw out a boxing organization from running boxing, which they've already done. This time, because they re-arbitrated the IBA.
When you say they've already done, you mean the IBA, yeah?
Yeah, they re-arbitrated that for this year. And the only reason they cited for this year was them allowing Russians to box under a Russian flag instead of an unlanded flag. So
there's also the corruption angle, right? That was investigated with their money trail being incredibly unclear. Yeah, because we can talk about the IBA for a second, sort of the scandals that are around it. You've got things that are kind of just whatever, go into things that are kind of sussy in today's day and age, to things that obviously organizations like the IOC is going to have an issue with. So you've got the CEO, which is Umar Kremlev, who has direct ties with Putin and the Kremlin. He is a Russian national. Their main sponsor is Gazprom, which is the Russian energy company. They are the only organization to allow Russians to fight under their own national flag. The disqualification of Khelif came suspiciously after her winning the fight against Russia. Now, admittedly, there were also other participants that got disqualified who you can't say the same about. But then even if you want to look at the press conference that the IBA gave yesterday, it was an absolute shit show. The dude arrived late. There were audio technical glitches. The conference was held in Russian instead of English. The translator was not able to keep up with him. He apparently was yelling out slurs against the IOC, according to the BBC. The whole thing was just determined to have been a farce, and they've moved on from it because it seemed like just another sort of political stunt.
Again, a lot of this is shitty window dressing to avoid the fact that the subject we're talking about, they are subject to the Court of Arbitration for Sports decisions on. They have a very legitimate appeal process that is never... The CAS is almost no controversy involved with them. The IBA chooses to and pays to be under the purview of the CAS for this testing. So they proactively subject themselves to third-party review in the subject we're talking about. So you can say anything you want about, oh, he's Russian, so he lets Russians fight under the Russian flag, and they had a shitty press conference, and he really hates the IOC. All of that, yeah, probably bad, I guess. Kind of makes sense when the IOC removed them from running international boxing when they're one of the biggest international boxing organizations. I would imagine he'd hate the IOC after that. None of it matters if we have evidence that they are beholden to a neutral third party in the function that we're talking about, which is their sex testing, and they are. And one athlete did not appeal at all after she was shown the test. One athlete did and then withdrew it. So we have to just look at it and go, listen, there are two big things that if they happened, we likely wouldn't even be having this conversation. If the IOC had stricter guidelines that they actually enforce, and if Imane actually followed through with her appeal. Neither of those things happened, but we can't say that because of that, you get to lie on the idea that there's no evidence because she is actively telling the IBA they can't share the evidence. You don't get to do that because the IBA's ban is evidence, especially when supported by a third-party arbitration structure that has a good reputation.
Responses to that?
The issue is kind of twofold. For starters, I will go back to the actual process of how it was done, which I believe that when Khelif was being disqualified, the initial action was taken solely by the IBA Secretary General and the CEO himself, and it was only ratified by the board afterwards. And that same IBA Secretary General, Olympos, was fired from the IBA amidst all the drama surrounding IBA being expelled from the Olympics body. Then you have the angle, which is a little bit more fun to talk about. The IOC allows for intersex participants. They allow for trans participants. We actually have a trans male boxer right now who I believe got knocked out of the race already. But yeah, it is what it is. The IOC allows for this. The IOC has other tests in place that, whilst not perfect, do seem to sort of be what they have agreed on as of right now, what the other orgs have agreed to, and what the participants have agreed to participate under. And the IBA knows this, and yet they keep going on smear campaigns to try and take as much fucking aggression out on AOC as is IOC. Sorry,
smear campaign. They've been smeared by the IOC, and they responded. Let's be clear: the first body to attack the other body was the IOC.
Hold on, just as much as the evidence of her withdrawing her appeal is evidence that there was something up with her IBA test, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that IOC kicked the IBA out is evidence just as strong that there was something fucky-wucky going on with the IBA.
No, not just as strong.
That's just as strong. No,
it's
the same fucking
Wick,
thing.
Let me, Wick.
It's just as much
evidence.
I'm responding to what Wick said to me.
It's one-to-one, apples-to-apples, buddy.
What did I say that made the IBA's evidence worthy as evidence? It is subject to a third-party arbitration structure with a good reputation. The IOC can unilaterally kick out whoever the fuck they want with no arbitration structure. You can appeal to the IOC, but you can't appeal to a third-party body that has any level of reputation. So no, it is not the same evidence because the IOC does not subject themselves
describe to me the appeal process,
neutral third party. For which, the IBA
or
the
IBA? To the neutral CAS that is totally above board with no controversies.
The CAS
do you have to pay money to appeal?
I don't believe you do.
Okay, you don't know.
The IBA pays,
what do you need to show to win that appeal?
Stop. What I know of, the IBA pays the CAS so that their athletes can appeal. And the athletes get to appeal for free. Does their representation get free travel? Probably not. That's what I mean when I say I don't know what your definition of do they have to pay to appeal. I don't know how much of it is done remotely. I don't know how much of it they have to pay to travel for. But none of it matters because Imane began the appeal process. So obviously they had the means to appeal and then didn't. There is a quality third-party appeals process that has ruled against Russia countless times. Russia's their favorite punching bag, the CAS. And yet the IBA still pays to be a part of it. And Imane withdrew her appeal. And Lin 2
But you're speculating as to why.
It doesn't matter why, because they had the right to do it and they didn't, and they're the ones withholding the information.
They started it, but they stopped.
There is one party that has the right to share information.
You have decided to assume why.
There is
It's
one
also
party
worth
that
to
has
mention-
privilege to release the information, and it is Imane. She's also the one that benefits most from that information going the way she wants it to, and she is not releasing it. What does that say to you? It's like the Boogie 988 thing.
It says that
If
there's
you have
something
this
in
thing, you
there
can-
that she doesn't want to have be public information. That could be unrelated to whatever it is that
Nope, 'cause
disqualified
you can
her.
select. You can selectively allow them to release
Yeah,
information. You
she
can say,
can-
"I want
The thing is-
everything
She can choose.
redacted but the chromosomes." I want everything redacted but the chromosomes. Or she could take it, redact everything, and just show the chromosomes. She's not doing it.
Yeah, just to be clear, why is it on Khelif to have this done and to have this published when the IOC allows her to participate in their sports events as
what was
it
the
is?
first thing I said? The first thing I said was the main culprit here is the IOC for not having guidelines that protect female athletes. But we've evaded that every single time. You basically, the only justification I've heard for that so far is, well, it's what they've decided.
Hold on. So
what-
when you say that they don't have guidelines to protect athletes,
They don't,
what do you mean
yeah.
by that?
I mean that their current guidelines don't protect female athletes.
How many have been injured in this year?
How many Olympic athletes
Yeah,
have been injured?
in this year? Yeah.
I don't even know. A lot. People get injured in the Olympics all the time. It has nothing to do with
Because
say,
of the
like-
because of the IOC testing. That's what I'm asking. Like, you're alleging that they're not protecting their female athletes.
Yeah,
I'm
they're not
asking, because
protecting
of
their
this lack of
competition
protection,
from
how much-
intersex people or trans people
Oh, so
beating
not their
out
physical
biological women.
Hold on. Yeah,
I mean,
but
yes,
that
it also
brings
protects
us
them physically. It does
that
both.
brings us to what I was
But
saying
we have
earlier.
two people who got banned by an international organization for not being totally women who
An
have
organization who
clinched
got banned for
medals.
corruption.
Have clinched. No, they haven't gotten banned by anybody but the IOC, who said they don't want to agree with them. The CAS had two chances to rule on whether they were corrupt in this regard, and neither of the appellates decided to appeal. So, no, the IBA has not been banned for corruption, accused of corruption by anybody but the IOC in regard to their sex testing. Nobody
They also
has
had
done
an
it.
appeal that the courts upheld that their ban was
Okay.
legit. They tried appealing, and that appeal was kicked out. Also, I do want to bring attention to the fact that when you say they
appealed the
didn't take
IOC.
actions to protect the safety of the competitors, they do.
No, their
That's why they have a
current-
series of requirements you have to meet in order to
No.
compete.
If
What you mean to
you
say is
have
that you
10
don't believe
nanom-
they
if
took
you have 10
appropriate actions
nanomoles per
against
dec-
Imane, having an
no.
advantage that comes as a result of her
No.
status as
I'm
intersex.
saying
This advantage, you've already
their
admitted, can be
outlines do not
non-existent.
protect
This advantage
athletes.
can be within the norm for cis women, which would effectively make it
Yeah.
non-existent. And if you want to make the argument that it does indeed give her an advantage, then you need to explain to me which one of these advantages is not being addressed by the IOC. In terms of height and reach, she's beaten by at least
Testosterone
6
level.
historic female Olympic boxers.
Testosterone
In
level.
terms of testosterone, she's within the limit, unless you want to tell
Yes,
me
that's what I'm
her-
saying. Is the limit is ridiculous. The limit is five
Okay,
times
so just
higher
to-
than the average
yeah, so
high-level
just
female
to-
athlete. It does
just
not
to
protect
recap
women.
this, okay, so just to recap this, we've got an organization that have determined the testosterone limit to be in a place that you disagree with, that they have been very transparent
That
about for a
doctors
number of
disagree with in
years.
sport. It
What do
is
you
a
mean that
bad
doctors
limit.
disagree with? Hold on.
Yes.
Let me just. No.
Doctors in charge of
the idea
WADA,
that
doctors in charge of
doctors
USADA,
they disagree
doctors in
with
charge
what?
of performance-enhancing drug organizations all over the world and the United States have said 10 nanomoles per liter is ridiculous. Athletes have said 10 nanomoles per liter is ridiculous. Female athletes all over the planet have said 10 nanomoles per liter is ridiculous. They're sitting there
And
as a
if there is a
high-performing
body
female with
that
50
wants to have
nanograms
a
per deciliter
different-
competing against people who can have
on.
288.
If
Are you
there
kidding
is-
me?
If there is a linear scientific evidence of this,
Yes.
as you have outlined, that being the specific sort of threshold for when you start having the advantage of over other women, then I would love to see it, because that doesn't seem to be the case
It is
as
a
linearly as you've
dose-dependent
described it.
advantage. Yes, it is
The
a
second of
dose-dependent
all
advantage.
is
Testosterone is a
okay. Hold on.
dose-dependent
What's
performance
Imane
enhancer.
Khelif's testosterone per nanometers?
We don't get to know. We can only know that it's under 10 nanograms per deciliter. That's
Yes,
the
and
problem.
you have already said that it is possible, right? That her limit is on the lower end. Yes or no?
Yes. What are you arguing against?
Yeah. What I'm trying to explain to you is that you have an organization which has determined these limits that you individually might disagree with, but that they
not
have
me
been very
individually. The vast
transparent
majority of
about.
competitive sports disagrees with
People
them.
have their sports organizations send their participants to take part under those limits that have been agreed on, that they know are there because the limits are very, very fucking public. and then afterwards they want to complain that something was done, that the limits are not good enough, or they want to disqualify participants midway through the event, as they have done with IBA board, the board that, by the way, has then agreed that they were not following any kind of protocol and were basically making shit up as they went. If the issue was with Imane Khelif's level of testosterone, why did they not disqualify her from the get-go? Why didn't they do these tests earlier? Why did they let her participate?
Hold on, the
The
IBA
IBA
said
did
this.
say the IBA said they did have high.
They've said
one of the
two
red
things.
flags was they had high testosterone, but the IBA doesn't test for testosterone.
president-
This
hold on.
is what people don't know. This is why you need to know about these fucking sporting organizations before you talk about them.
Well, let's just-
The IBA is going to get that information late.
I
because
have what the
sports
IBA actually
organizations
said. We don't have
test
to
for PEDs.
We don't have to.
They
like,
hire
speculate.
someone who tests for PEDs.
So the IBA has said two things. The president stated that Imane had elevated T, but in a press statement, the organization said they didn't test for testosterone. So
Yeah, so you have the president, who is, by the way, fucking mired in controversy, claiming that she has high testosterone that they don't test for, by the way, and they disqualify her in the middle of the fucking event.
Yes, that often happens. Do you know when most drug tests happen in combat sports? Since you talked so smugly as if you know this fucking sport, when do they test for drugs? When do they test for sex? When do they do it?
It depends on the event. For stuff
They
like
do it in
testosterone, they do it in
competition.
yes, at the start of the competition. But when it comes to stuff
Yes.
like testosterone, for instance, they're often requiring their athletes to have consistent tests done over a period of 12 months that prove that
Yes.
they're below a certain threshold.
Yep. And
So if she
you
is
get a
having
red
her test done for
flag
12
out of
months-
competition, and then you get it again in competition, right? Because you use out of competition.
Where did that red
as the
flag come from?
baseline. The red flag would come from, if you had a little bit of humility and listened, an out of competition
Trying to.
testosterone amount isn't going to necessarily get somebody dead to rights, because somebody could just have naturally higher testosterone. So say she has 90, 100 nanograms per deciliter testosterone out of competition. You can't just say she's juicing. What you do is you see what her in-competition test shows. And if her in-competition test suddenly drops to 50 or drops to 40 or 30, and her T ratio is off, then you know she was trying to get away with juicing out of competition and it dropped in competition. So likely what happened when she got her in competition test, it didn't drop. And they realized, okay, she just has something going on with her testosterone. Let's sex test her, because we now have multiple camps complaining about her and her testosterone is abnormally high. And we've determined that she's not artificially increasing it by all odds. We need to sex test her to see where the source of this elevated testosterone is from, to make sure it's still fair for her to compete. That test is going to take time. It's not like a fucking test strip where you dip it and it immediately turns a color and you know how much testosterone she has.
So they knew
these
about
tests
it
over
beforehand,
the
yes?
course of days.
Okay, so by what you're telling me, they had a red flag of her having high testosterone for some period of time before the event, and then
More
they had
than
to wait for
likely, yeah.
conclusive evidence. Yes, so if it was more than likely, can you explain to me why IBA kicked her out without following any protocol? No protocol was established, and the CEO himself booted her out of the competition. If he's known about this being a red flag, why did they do nothing to establish protocol?
This is a very unique situation, and again,
high levels of testosterone in a sports event are a very unique situation. Can you say that in the affirmative, please?
Yes. As a result of intersex characteristics, high testosterone in a female sporting event is pretty
That
rare.
you're assuming they're
because you're
intersex
saying
characteristics.
that they didn't act in protocol. They admitted it. What they admitted was they didn't have a great protocol for intersex characteristics, not for high testosterone or kicking out for PEDs. They didn't have a protocol for kicking somebody out who didn't flag for PEDs but did flag for XY chromosomes, because usually that would mean you're trans, and that would mean you would pop for PEDs and they could kick you out really easily.
I want to get a
but
temperature.
they didn't have an organization for intersex athletes. It's a really unique situation.
Okay, I want to get a temperature.
It's not really
check
that
of
unique, given the
Hold
fact
on.
that they've moved away from
Chris,
this testing
Chris
in
and Jeb,
99.
Chris and Jeb, I love it. I love the energy. High testosterone in both. I give you both high T marks. Good job. I want to make sure, though, that we kind of get a temperature check of the room. I want to see who thinks that because the Olympics does allow trans and intersex athletes to compete, right? Who here has a problem with that? Raise your hand if you have a problem with the Olympics allowing. Okay, I'll start with Daniela. explain why, and then I want to hear from Bronwyn to explain why not, and then I'll let the testosterone guys go again. So,
Of
go
course,
ahead.
I'm not a
Finish your
medical
thought.
professional, and clearly I have very limited knowledge on the sporting or organizations that are involved in this. So forgive me for not having a lot of input
You're fine.
in the last issue. But as far as I'm aware, when you're born with specific chromosomes, that aids in the developmental process of your musculoskeletal system. And so clearly there is an unfair advantage that men have over women, and I just do not think, specifically in the cases of male to female transitions, they should not be involved in sports other than their biologically assigned sex. As far as intersex individuals are concerned, or people with other genetic abnormalities, I mean, specifically with those genetic abnormalities like with like genetic chimerism, I think it's called. It's a case-by-case basis. I'm still on the fence of whether or not they should have their own league, or if they should compete with their sex assigned at birth, or the one that they have decided to go with as far as intersex is concerned. But that, I think, still plays a major role in their development of their muscular skeletal structure and development, as well as their testosterone production. Obviously, I think I don't have to explain that there's a big difference between male versus female performance. So I have a big issue with specifically transition individuals competing in sports, specifically male to female and female sports. That's just, I would say, my generic position on that.
Sure, and you would be against it at the Olympic level too, correct? Gotcha.
You're silent, Wick.
I can't hear.
We can't hear you.
Hardware muted, I think.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Unfortunately.
I was hitting the wrong button. So to be clear, you have a problem with it in Olympic sporting events, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Bronwyn, can you explain why you don't have a problem with this? Why intersex and trans athletes should be allowed to participate in the sports? Go ahead.
No, I actually I agree with Danielle that there is
Okay.
yeah. I didn't say it didn't. I think, well, like she said, the male to female transition does become a bit of an issue because you have somebody who has gone through proper puberty and all that kind of stuff, and then possibly changing genders afterwards, which gets unfortunately taken advantage of a lot. The intersex becomes a little bit more of a gray area. I do not, I'm not jealous of the people who have to figure those kinds of things out as far as what the thresholds and that kind of stuff are for allowing them to compete. But as we have said, there is always, not for all things, but there are certain elements of different sports that have been proven to be more adventurous to men, right?
I must have misread the hands. I apologize.
Sorry, yeah, I put my hand. I did put my hand up. I would want everybody to be able to compete, especially if it's something they're really into or really passionate about. It doesn't seem fair that they can't. But then I feel like there needs to be some sort of subdivision, whether that becomes male, female, open, things like that. There's already that kind of stuff for, say, the shooting competitions and that kind of stuff, because there isn't any real advantage between men and women competing in that. But there are certain things, like boxing is definitely one that becomes a big difference between your highest competing female and your highest competing males. I think, we've said, the IOC needs to come up with better testing methods to figure out what the threshold is. But I also was a little confused there, because we were talking about the threshold for testosterone being a joke, and you're probably right, and the testosterone levels should be much lower. But then what are you more in favor of? The genetic testing that tells you whether or not somebody is intersex, or the testosterone levels that tell you that somebody who is intersex still falls within a reasonable amount of testosterone that they could compete against women without there being any advantage to them?
Yeah, I guess I'll just go into my take on it. My take on it is it's a two-step test. This is the way most things happen in law and regulation. A two-step test. One, is there an advantage present? And two, is that advantage sourced from male biology in any way? Chromosomes, testicles, whatever. If they meet those two criteria, then they don't get to compete against women in sports because they are experiencing male advantages to any degree. For trans people, that would mean you don't get to compete, period. For intersex people, it would be that you could potentially compete if you had like Swires where your testosterone is still at a normal or even low level. You just have XY chromosomes. But in a lot of cases, it would be on the athlete to provide that documentation because not all sports organizations have the means to test for all of that stuff. As far as trans competitors, where should they compete? You would compete in the unprotected men's league. I've thought about maybe an open league. It just doesn't make any sense. Any open league you're going to have is just going to become a haven for all the dudes who couldn't compete in the men's, and they're just going to go over, and then trans people are just going to be getting battered. And it's going to become the right-wing grifters' favorite league because they're just going to have a bunch of trans hate fodder of a bunch of dudes beating the crap out of trans women. And I don't necessarily think anybody wants to see that. So for me, the threshold for testosterone would probably need to be lower, but it should also do what like the UFC has done with their drug organizations, which is it's not just a testosterone limit, but also a ratio of testosterone to epitestosterone and testosterone to sex hormone binding globulin. So you can see how much free testosterone they have. Because what a lot of people will bring up is there are intersex people who have a lot of SHBG. And what that does is it binds to serum testosterone and doesn't allow it to do anything, basically, which means that those people might not have that great of an advantage. The Olympics has the means to test for this. The UFC, NFL, NBA, they have the means to test for this stuff. The concern is when you're talking about high school sports, college sports that don't, I think you just need to have a blanket no trans, no intersex competing with females because we have to be extra careful that female competition is protected. Because that's the whole reason we have female competition in the first place. And colleges and high schools just don't have the means to test all that.
Chris, what are your thoughts?
I've, to the best of my knowledge, the most up-to-date thing I've read on this is a study on the effect of gender-affirming hormones on athletic performance in trans women and trans men, which has included an advantage that lasts for about 2 years, assuming the transition was done post-puberty, and longer than that when it comes to running specifically. So if the given athlete in question transitioned pre-puberty, then they should compete with the sex they've transitioned to, and if they transitioned less than those 2-ish years and after puberty, then they simply shouldn't be allowed to compete. In terms of the broader criticism, the levels of testosterone that were set out are ridiculously high. The issue is that we don't even know if Imane is within them or not, or within the norms for cis women. The current boxing unit in Paris has agreed with these regulations and they compete under them. If the 2028 American org wants to lower it, then I will support their ability to do so. In terms of intersex people, the issue gets far more complicated because you can have example of intersex people like Caster Semenya, who had historic trouble of lowering her testosterone to the required level, and you can have intersex people who are virtually identical to cis women. That's why the genetic exclusion here is useless. Stuff like current passport determination, on the other hand, is also very problematic because in places like the USA, you can change your passport sex. So obviously you need more than just that. At the same time, I would like for the attacks to be directed at the organization, not the individual participants. And when it comes to Jeb's point about schools, then I think they should be allowed to compete so long as they're willing to sort of dish out the money for the test out of their own pocket. Or there can also be some fucking social projects or some social nets in order to supplement some of that money. I don't know how that works in America in terms of like the overall funding. You guys spend shitloads on military. We can probably, move stuff about.
Yeah.
Okay,
well, then America won't be running the tournament most likely. Boxing is probably not going to be in the American because of the IBA conflict, because the Olympics has basically said we don't want to handle it. So you guys need to find what they see as a sufficient international boxing organization, and World Boxing is looking, the WBA, which is any boxing event you guys have seen likely came through the WBA. That's like the professional boxing organization. The WBA might be able to step in, but every boxing organization has serious corruption issues. The WBA has had Russian and Mexican corruption issues because they have to use local judges. Local judges are generally known as corrupt in boxing. Boxing is a very corrupt sport. So boxing likely just won't be a part of the Olympics next year, unfortunately, because they don't want to let like state athletic commissions do it. If the California State Athletic Commission, if CSAC was in charge of the LA boxing, I would have no problems. There would be no problems because there would be no trans or intersex athletes competing against women most likely. But
so you don't think there's going to be boxing in the next Summer Olympics?
The Olympics has been pretty clear about that if there's not a suitable international alternative to the IBA by the next Olympics, which is a really short period of time to make that happen, that it's just not
also, to my understanding,
it.
Wick, for what it's worth, I don't think boxing itself is that popular across the all of the Olympics categories. I could be
amateur
wrong on
boxing,
this, but I don't think that people really
I don't watch
because
the
if you it's the issue that you have is that Olympics have a lot of sort of stuff in there that you don't get to see every single day, and stuff in there that isn't televised in these huge fucking events, and boxing just isn't one of those. If you want to watch high level boxing, you don't go to the Olympics. It's kind of just for me, boxing at the Olympics is between the other sports that I enjoy watching.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So my issue with, I guess, just to drive conversation here, my issue with all of this, right, is how we are making these determinations when it comes to Imane Khelif. I don't know whether or not she should be competing or not competing because I don't have enough information to make that determination. I don't think that her putting in an appeal and then withdrawing it is sufficient evidence for me to say anything, especially since she is from Algeria. And if it did come out that she had XY chromosomes, but she was, say, had a normal level comparable to cis women of testosterone, it would be an issue for her, right? In Algeria,
should be murked.
Specifically.
More than likely. Yeah,
it would be a
fucking
gone. Issue, right? And this is well above and beyond any boxing hopes and things like that. I don't know if you know this, but it's illegal to be trans in that nation. And just that, having those chromosomes, that's going to be a big problem for her. So I can see many reasons why, regardless of, I could see many reasons why she wouldn't want to release that information publicly, because even some nonce in her country, right? Seeing, oh, you have XY chromosomes, that must be you're a man, and then going crazy is, we have privacy laws and these things for a reason, because people are really weird. So it's just not enough information for me to say. But I want to hear both of you, Daniel and Jeb, push back against that. Maybe we can get some back and forth going. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all on the IOC, because what I hear everybody's knee-jerk argument is, before we really talk about the nitty-gritty of why it's a bad one, is they're like, well, the Olympics let them compete, so that has to mean they're good, right? The expectation in most people's minds when they don't know much more about it is, well, the Olympics has to have the highest standard. They have to have the best, most science-backed standard that exists. And they don't. They openly have basically no standard. I mean, they literally have no standard for sex. And they have basically no standard for sex-sourced advantages because of their insanely high testosterone threshold. And the whistle has been blown on this by experts throughout generally the PED field, because that's where all the money is in testing for PEDs. The whistle's been blown several times and they just refuse to do anything about it. I think it's up to the Olympic body to be the body they're expected to be and have strict standards, but they've chosen to be an activist body instead. Which, it's whatever. Maybe that just means boxing is not the sport to have in there. Because while when I say protecting competition, I generally mean protecting the potential for females to be successful in the competition. When it comes to combat sports, there is a genuine safety concern. Because even when you're not talking about overt injuries like broken limbs or faces, you're talking about head trauma that we know adds up invisibly to the point that you don't know the severity of their issue until they're already dead and you look at their brain. So it's
I don't
maybe
know. I can tell a couple
of
people have been on my panel. I can pretty much
Yeah.
tell that they.
But yeah, I think maybe Olympics boxing should be dead for as long as this ridiculous trans politics and sports argument is going on, because I think there is a genuine physical safety concern too. Wrestling's probably similar. I would say, you've got people who have been injured so bad that they can't walk from sports like wrestling. So I don't necessarily want there to be an opportunity for someone who's biologically male to do that to a woman, which I don't think is the case with Imane, but is openly possible in the IOC, and the fact they encourage it. They say, just get woman on your passport and get this testosterone or less for a year and you're in, which is ridiculous. Like a year is not enough time.
That's exactly that's what I was going to say. And to flesh it out a little bit, like IOC has a standard for sex, it's just a shit one, because the problem that you have is that America is really pushing the gender culture like a motherfucker, and many countries are not. And the IOC is kind of like in this place right now where they check your passport to determine if you're male or if you're female, which on one hand, in places like Algeria, fair enough. In Algeria, you can't change the sex on your passport. Being trans is illegal, you can't transition. If the passport that Imane has says female, then she was assigned female at birth. In America, however, that's a whole different story. In America, you can change the sex on your passport. So you could have someone who is openly trans, who is on the upper end of the testosterone limit, join the competition, and they would legitimately be a part of that competition, which obviously would bring, wouldn't be ideal. It'd bring a lot of issues. And I don't know to what extent the safety equipment would alleviate those issues, especially given the fact that, again, like Jeb said, they encourage trans athletes to compete, which for something like trans men isn't that big of a deal, because the unfortunate biological reality is that trans men don't have an advantage in sports. The same isn't quite true for trans women. You have an example of this right now. There is a trans competitor, a trans man whose name I forgot. He was also a boxer, is a boxer, and he lost. He lost quite early on, and he is no longer part of the race for any of the medals.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like the men's, people always say, like, well, where should they compete? I'm like, you can compete in men's sports, and that's why I don't like when people on my side, they say you compete with the sex assigned at birth. I would rather them just optically use the language, you compete in the unprotected men's division, because that's what it should be about. Because the people who say, like, compete with the one on your passport, half of them are doing that to basically passively snicker at a trans person, be like, you're really a man kind of thing. Whereas I'm just focused on the advantage part. So if you have a male biological advantage, you compete with the unprotected men's division. I'm not trying to call you a man or anything like that, but that's where you got to go.
Yeah, how, and this is for everyone. How I understand the advantage argument, but why is it simply gender advantage? We have people who are born with advantages biological that you cannot change, right? That you cannot change. The people taller than me are always going to have advantages over me that I simply do not, right? They do have weight classes in things like boxing because they recognize that people of the same gender can be born with advantages, right? We have examples in other arenas where people are born with huge biological, genetically anomalous advantages. Michael Phelps, a great example. Simone Biles, great example. They are born with certain genetic advantages that are freakish in nature, right? Not to throw that word out there too willy-nilly, but they're just so far removed from the average. It doesn't have to do with training. It doesn't have to do with anything other than that. Obviously, the training is needed. But I guess, what other limits would we place on
the issue that you have? The issue that you have, Wick, is that it's an insufficient argument, in my opinion, to say that because the current criteria are not perfect, then we should forego them altogether. And the issue on the flip side you have is that if you start creating subcategories for every single genetical advantage, then fuckers like Phelps are just going to be swimming on his own.
Yeah, and it's the other thing too is in a lot of sports, I think there's an interesting conversation to be had, maybe like height classes in swimming to allow someone who's like 5'11" to swim, because you don't see anybody under like 6'12" in fucking Olympic swimming. But it's a lot of the difference in different sports is there are advantages to being small and nimble and agile in a given sport, and there are advantages in being big and bulky and like stocky, like in basketball, right? You just play a different position, but you're still on the same team. And so you don't want to eliminate the ability to dynamically use what your body gave you. It's just finding the advantages that pretty clearly make it so it's not competitive. And testosterone and male puberty is one of those things that in most cases is a zero compromises advantage. When you're big, tall, and stocky, you're slower and have worse cardio than the people smaller than you. If you just have more testosterone, though, you probably have better cardio, and you're stronger, and you're faster, and you can think faster while under mechanical load.
I'll give you a little bit of an anecdotal example that I'm aware of, right? So I had an acquaintance growing up who wanted to be on the Junior Olympic volleyball team, right? they were amazing. Amazing. They weren't allowed to even try out for the team because they did not meet the minimum height requirement
Yep.
for Junior Olympics volleyball. Like, we have, if we are interested in fairness, how is that fair?
To be
I mean,
fair, why would they have a minimum requirement to join to begin with?
So
it's
well,
it's not because that's not a sporting
something.
That's
right?
not a sporting rule, right? That's the
That was
American
like their
team
individual.
decide.
Or...
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
American team deciding we want to beat other teams, and so we want taller players, right? You can.
No,
be
I
any-
understand the pragmatic side of it. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just, I just wanted to say that, like, at that point, it wouldn't be fair week, but at the same time, like,
Yeah,
fuck, just life in general isn't, you know?
it's one of those things where it's like I agree with you, Wick, that that's where maybe it would be interesting to have like height classes in sports like volleyball and swimming, where that tends to happen, so you can get more people involved. But that doesn't. There's just not that much crossover with males and females to where you would need that. Like generally, if you look at something like the UFC or other individualized sports that have both men and women in them, the worst men would still probably absolutely knock the crap out of the highest performing women, like record breaking, greatest of all time women, because they just have a no compromises biological advantage. Their testosterone makes them stronger and faster and have better cardio and be able to think better while under mechanical load. Like it's just a no compromises advantage. Whereas height, at least there's compromises to that advantage.
Right, and it doesn't pose a direct physical risk, unlike what you see
Yeah,
with male
true.
versus female. I mean, if you're trying to regulate all genetic differences or abnormalities, at that point, you're just trying to eliminate competition, whereas there shouldn't even be competition between people of two completely obviously different categories, with physical potential. So it's just a matter of safety as well.
Should do the polar opposite. You should add another category, Wick, and encourage steroid use in that one, because I just want to see what happens.
Look, if we're going to go full genetic anomalies, okay, I'm for the cybernetic punk future where boxers are grafting another pair of arms on their bodies to be able
Well,
to
they're
move
doing
the correct way.
not cybernetic, but
go.
there's an organization trying to build an enhanced games competition where you can openly dope. And I would imagine that organization might be a little bit looser with like the trans stuff, because the women will be allowed. Because here's the thing: this is the real inherent unfairness: is a trans woman can suppress her testosterone to exactly 199 nanograms per deciliter, or sorry, 279 nanograms per deciliter, and sit there for a year and then compete. But the women they're fighting against don't get to supplement with testosterone to get up to 279 nanograms per deciliter, right? They have to stay where they're at. Whereas this trans person now gets to fuck with theirs. Well, in this enhanced league, you might have a more open competition with trans athletes because the women will be allowed to supplement with testosterone. They will be able to make up that gap. They will likely still be at a disadvantage. So I'm guessing that the enhanced games will still have issues with trans athletes competing with women, but it wouldn't be as stark an advantage. And you might even have some women trying to fuck around and go compete in the men's league. Because somebody said it in the chat as a joke, I think. Why would you y'all want to rob women of the moment of like beating up a man that sneaks into the women's league? That happens in sports. The Olympics doesn't allow it to happen for some reason, but in international Muay Thai, there are a couple women who have gone to the UFC who have wins against men on their record, because in like Thailand and places like that, if women want to go and try to beat like a competitive male Thai fighter, they can do it. And sometimes it works out, oftentimes it doesn't.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the guests here on competition? Imane, forgive me for the mispronunciations, gang. Imane Khelif, or anything else regarding this situation? I think we've kind of like litigated this, but I am curious if we have any other avenues that I haven't thought of yet. Please go ahead. Floor is open.
I, for one, am genuinely happy, although this is a shit situation, that the What is a Woman crowd is finally catching up to the conversation. It's been a while, it's been coming, but you know what? I will be here to help them out and catch them up so that they don't feel like the weird one out.
Fair enough. That it does make the interesting question, right? If a intersex person can get pregnant, are they just not women, right? Like, are they just not, doesn't being able to get pregnant make you a woman by definition? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is kind of interesting because this is a perfect example that sort of kills the idealism side of the argument of woman is anything you want it to be, and the objectivism side of the argument, which is a woman is XX chromosome. And it provides a big dub for pragmatists like myself, which is you use the definition that's useful in the context you're talking about, which I do think it can over time move the conversation forward as people die down from the emotion of it all, which is that Imane could very well be a woman in every aspect of her life and still be pragmatically a man in terms of sport and in terms of which division she goes into. That doesn't mean I have to call her a he, because in 90% of life, she is a woman. She's, by all reports, has a vagina, potentially can reproduce. A lot of intersex people can reproduce. Even if she can't, she does look like a woman. Even if you want to argue a masculine woman, there's a lot of masculine women in the UFC. She acts like a woman, raises a woman, whatever else. So someone can be a woman. You can call her she, and you can still say, don't. In sports specifically, the pragmatic definition of woman changes, and she's a man in this context in terms of needing to fight in the men's league.
I will add on to that. I will say one other thing that I wish was the case here is that if Imane is concluded that, if it's concluded, let's say, that she shouldn't be fighting other women, then I believe that should at least allow her to fight in the men's league at least. But the issue is that the IOC only looks at the passport. So if she was somehow concluded not to be able to fight, not to be allowed to fight women, she also wouldn't be allowed to fight men. So in effect, she would be disbarred from Olympics altogether. And I reject that wholesale. If it is concluded that she has an advantage as a result of being intersex, then I believe she should be allowed, if she so desires, to fight men in the what is she, light welterweight?
The weight classes are different in women's, I think. I'm not sure though with amateur boxing what she is. I think she's welterweight or light welterweight.
Yeah, but the point is that she should be allowed to fight men if she so desires.
I agree. I think women just in general should be able to fight men in the Olympics. It's very rare.
Danielle,
that's
are
not
you
the
fighting
case,
a man if you get a chance in the Olympics?
I don't think so.
No, what
I
about
don't think
you,
I'm
Bronwyn?
gonna
You gonna
last.
take a few swings? Oh, did I cut out? Hello?
I hear you.
Yeah.
Come on, Daniela, would you not? What if it's like a really
Oh.
old and slow man like Wick?
Was he still asking me?
No, I was asking
What?
Bronwyn. And
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
oh, well,
would
Sorry,
you
I
fight a
misunderstood
man in
that.
the Olympics if given the opportunity? He was asking.
If I was any fucking good at fighting, I would
Yeah, there you go.
give it a fucking shot.
fair enough.
Um,
Okay, well, great.
yeah, I think that's a good idea. Is that like women should be allowed to, like, it's one of those like an agreed upon situation, right? Like they said in Thailand or whatever, like they can compete in Muay Thai if they want to against the men. And I think as far as my opinion with like what's currently happening is like, yes, we've agreed that established that the IOC's regulations for what is acceptable for the women's league may or may not be shit. And they should probably work on that. But as it stands currently, I mean, all the competitors knew what the eligibility requirements were and therefore chose to compete. So what it is it stands for now. And if Imane happens to win and has a gold medal, I don't think, no matter what comes forward now, that can be stripped away from her. But I think going forward, they definitely need to work on what their regulations are.
Unfortunately,
I don't think
hold
she
on.
should get anything stripped.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, I think while she won't officially get anything stripped, even having this be a question that has gone viral, right, is going to mean that there's going to be a significant portion of the population who, even if she wins gold, will think she did not earn it, right? That she did not deserve it, that she stole it from quote unquote real women. And that is going to be something that is, I think it's deeply sad to me that someone who, again, all the participants, as you mentioned, agreed to these rules, whether they are good rules or bad rules. Everyone agreed that these are the rules we're going to go with, and yeah, it's just it's just sad that no matter how good you are, it won't matter if people think that you may have been a man, or may have male chromosomes, or whatever.
The
It
thing
just
is,
won't matter.
we can't really do anything about that. And I think I would be infinitely more fine with that just being a reality for us to contend with if people were at least honest enough to look into the situation to the sort of like an honest extent at the very least. Because even if you look at the fight that started all of this, right, which was her against the Italy's Carini, I think her name was, like everyone's making it out to be like this grand protest by Carini, when in reality, Carini didn't say a single fucking transphobic thing at any point. She then apologized for not shaking Khalif's hand. She then said that everything's fair game because Khalif qualifies under the criteria as it was set out. She also dropped her guard and got smacked fucking head on, which was that wasn't a punch of like some fucking unga bunga male aggression gorilla power. She just dropped her guard and got smacked. And also, she has I don't want to say a history because that sounds a bit more mean than I intend for it to, but she's got hit and cried about getting hit and then like dropped out of matches before as well. Like Carini is by no means this impossible fucking peak of female athlete who just got, beaten up by a man. And honestly, if people were able to look at the situation holistically, sort of have a conversation similar to what we've done here, and then still arrive at the conclusion that there's something inherently unfair about it, then so be it. Just don't lie about the details of what happened.
Yeah, that's one thing that's important to note because, yeah, right, Imane's getting bullied by the right-wing anti-trans grifters, and the Italians now getting bullied by kind feminist liberals that decided that she's now a piece of shit because she got emotional at the Olympics. She's since even gone as far as to say she hopes Imane wins gold. Like, she's been a very good sport about it. She's very supportive of Imane. Fighters all the time cry and don't shake hands because it sucks to lose, especially sucks to lose when you get cracked in the nose like that because you never know if it's broken or something. And but one of the
her
big
reason
things
for fitting was legit at that point, right? So not to interrupt you, but I mean, like when it comes to taking injury seriously, if you get smacked to a point where you feel like your nose is broken and you don't know what the fuck is going on, it's like legit for you to say, hey, hold on, I need to drop this, I need to forfeit. Like, what's the alternative? You're just going to keep trying to take brain damage when you can't breathe?
Exactly.
Rocky did it, okay? Rocky did it, and he is.
Well, Rocky was getting
only
paid.
Thing I know of how boxing specifically.
People don't pay attention to this. They don't get paid. One of the other gripes that the IOC said they didn't want the IBA in charge because it was the IBA wanted to reward prize money for the first time in the Olympics in a long time. And they said, no, if you're a boxer by trade and you make money boxing, you're not going to keep taking hits on an already broken nose in the one boxing match you're going to do all year that's not paying you any money. So that's totally sensible too. The thing about Imane always having
just a fact check on that, like, because I've heard different things on this. I heard that if she had won, she would have gotten paid.
I don't think they do prize money in Olympic boxing because it has to be amateur. Let me see though. I could be wrong. I might have changed it.
I know that
prizes could also be national, right? It could be that depending on how well she does, she'd get paid directly by like the Italian government.
Yeah, I don't know the
oh yeah, so that she could get paid by her government, but yeah, no, the IBA wanted to pay €100,000 to gold medalists and $100,000 and $25,000 to their national federation and $25,000 to their coach, and the IOC said no. So it may be that they wanted to pay less, but more than likely I think what it's looking like is the IBA, regardless of the fact that they weren't running the games, was going to pay out the boxers, actually, according to this article. The IBA was just going to pay the ones who won anyway. But it's like, it still makes, because they want to maintain legitimacy as the major international boxing body other than the WBA. Because the WBA also, is like America's game.
Right, like what's the issue with paying them for, like, assuming that people who do better get paid more? Then, like, I don't think there's any issue of paying them for being there. They have to qualify. They have to compete in other. Like,
I'm just curious if there's reasoning behind it. That's all.
I would imagine also, they just want to maintain their place in the forefront of international boxing, whether or not they IOC invited them to compete.
Fair enough.
Also, I want to address real quick the fucking peanut gallery in your chat, Wick. Usually I wouldn't bother until after the panel, but like there are some fucking imbeciles in there saying that you can fight through a broken nose, and at the Olympics you should. She got a nose broken from a fucking power bomb in the first round, in the first 46 seconds of that round. She got her nose broken in like 1/9 of the overall time that she would have been there, and she herself said that like at that point she wasn't like sure if she can breathe. For anyone in chat to say that like she should have fought through this, you either take joy at the prospect of women being beaten up, or you just fucked in the head.
Yeah, it's just, if people always talk shit about fighters, that's what I was going to say about the Imane having an asterisk thing. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of any sporting event that gets a lot of attention. The winners are always going to have an entire massive crowd giving you every reason why their win was illegitimate, or it doesn't matter, or they were favorited by the organization or whatever. And unfortunately for the Italian boxer, she's also going to have a bunch of people who have never taken a punch to the nose in their lives tell her what getting a broken nose and maybe a ruptured sinus feels like, and that she should have fought through it. So it's like, you're never going to make everybody happy.
So I think we've kind of circled the drain on this a little bit. I think we've arrived at, weirdly, a consensus, which almost never happens on my panels, but I'm glad that it did today. It was enlightening as someone who, again, I don't know too much about sports, but it was a fun topic nonetheless. We're not ending the stream. I'm going to give each of these people a lovely outro, and then at 8 o'clock, I'm going to be going on to the Heel Shit podcast. Their name, not mine. And we're going to be talking about all this political drama that's been going on recently. So that should be fun. But I wanted to give each of these individuals a chance to have their say, give last thoughts on this, and then tell people where that you can find them. And if you like the content, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're not going anywhere, but that would help. We're going to start with Chris, and we're going to end with Bronwyn. Chris, what do you got?
To conclude sort of the conversation, I'd say that sex is determined by a number of different factors. You've got chromosomes, you've got hormones, internal and external genitalia, you've got secondary sex characteristics. It's just a complicated situation. Most people are never tested for those factors, and the governing bodies at all of the Olympics need to determine which tests they will require and which factors they value most for like their eligibility criteria. For so long as these factors are not just like fucking weirdly out there, I will support orgs wanting to lower, for instance, the testosterone threshold. I think that's okay. I would say that the timing of this whole thing is sus. The history of IBA and their corruption is sus, even though the other organizations are not without their own issues. And the history of Russian disinformation is very sus, especially given the current political climate. I would like more transparency, and I would like for the attacks to be directed at the IOC rather than Imane. But I mean, ultimately that's not up to me. The criteria for the competition were set out, and everyone in the Olympics agreed to fight under them. My name is Chris Speaks. I'm a variety discourse streamer and a YouTuber extraordinaire. Tomorrow I'll try and release the video on Xanderhol being a fucking pathetic man-child. So if you guys like Twitch ball drama, then feel free to hit that subscribe button. And other than that, yeah, I like going on panels and talking about things, although I rarely get to do so because Wick refuses to stream in European-friendly time zone. So blame him.
Well, it's okay. Britain, at least the part of Europe that is closest to America, is currently burning itself down, and that'll be a fun topic for Friday. But thanks for being here, Chris. You should check them out, gang. I have links to all these people in the description of my YouTube, except for Jeb Tan, but I will add that later on. Thank you again, Jeb Tan, for coming out. So check Chris out and give him a follow. Jeb Tan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess for the main topic, Imane, everything points to the idea that Imane and Lintu both had anomalous results in sex testing. That probably should have at least called for deeper investigation by the IOC, if not disbarring them from the competition. While the IBA has had corruption issues in the past, it's never been a sex testing, and they have an arbitration process that Imane and Lintu both chose not to follow through with. They also have the sole privilege to release any part of that sex testing that they want to, including that they have XX chromosomes, and they're not doing it. They can redact as much of that information as they want. The IOC needs stricter standards. Trans athletes should not be able to compete with women, and intersex athletes should mostly not be able to compete with women unless they themselves are able to prove throughout the history of their life that they have never had elevated levels of testosterone as a result of their intersex characteristics. That should be the case moving forward, and the IOC should be the one ensuring that everybody that they have run each individual sport abides by those rules for sports where gender separation is a thing. And yeah, I'm Jeb Tan. I'm just on Twitter, Jeb Tan RIP. Other than that, blame the IOC over Imane. But if it does turn out that Imane did have anomalous things and didn't share it, I do think that's worth criticizing as well.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Gang, he was such a good sport with coming in last minute. So please give him a follow. You can find him at Jeb Tan. He's been chatting in my Twitch chat. I will update later on the YouTube to show that his links and stuff in there. But yeah, give him a follow. Thank you again. Daniela, please.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that most of us seem to have reached a consensus as to the necessity of keeping women's sports, maintaining it as a women's sport. But I think the lack of clarity, or the explicit lack of clarity of Imane's sex status is a bit concerning, and also it's rather enlightening. And I think how Wick said previously is that it's bringing into the conversation of intersex people performing in sports. So I'm glad that there is a discourse happening about this, but there also has been a lot of disinformation concerning it and surrounding it as well. Their inability to come out and actually clarify the details of their sex status, I think, is concerning. I think it is a bit revealing. But also, Karina's history of apparently crying before about being hit, that's news to me. I wasn't aware of that. So I think that's also contributes to the conversation quite a bit, which also sparked this into the controversy, bigger than it probably should have been. But I think this all comes down to safety. It is unfortunate, perhaps, that the IBA has kind of let the cat out of the bag, considering that Imane is in Algeria. So it is illegal to be trans. I do not believe they're trans. I don't think having a genetic abnormality is illegal in Algeria. But regardless, even if the cat is out of the bag, it's still a matter of safety. There's a reason why we do have these regulations. And so we have to still maintain and observe these regulations. And so if they would clarify the situation, I think it would be better for themselves and the discourse in general. But it doesn't look like they're going to. So I guess we're just left questioning. But it is good to see that at least most of us have come to a general consensus concerning the safety of women in sports and maintaining that. So that's pretty much my overall thoughts on it.
Well, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you. Gang, we have a link to her stuff in the YouTube description. Go click on that link and give her a follow and all her spots and places and things like that. Really appreciate you being on here. And as the political season heats up, I will be inviting you on again. We got a lot of stuff that's been happening. Biden dropped out. We have the VP pick coming tomorrow. Trump may or may not have backed out with the debate with Kamala. Lots to talk about. I'm sure you'll be a great voice for the other side on there. Thank you again for coming. Check her out, gang. Last but certainly not least, someone who DM'd me last night and was like, I want on the show. Bronwyn, please give us what you got.
Well, I was just I didn't DM needing to be on the show. I was just asking if you were going to cover it, just because I don't get raged a lot, and it was just all the hate directed towards Imane was, doing just that, a lot of rage. So I'm glad we can talk about it, and like we've said, if you're going to subject your rage to anything, it's the IOC for whatever their requirements are. I think, like we've said, the potential that if she is not releasing the information like that is also a little suspect for her. But I feel like because of where she's from and the possible implications of that, it might even just be her own safety issue that she would not want that to come to light. I don't know if that would mean that then realistically she should have withdrew herself from the competition or what have you. But I mean, it also comes down to, does she really have an unfair advantage, even if she is intersex, because she has fought and lost to women before. The Italian that did cry after she hit her said she'd never been hit that hard, but she's also been knocked out. So I feel like a knockout probably was a bit harder. But I think my biggest issue, like I said, when I came on here, was more about the social media mob squad that gets on these things without any actual information on the fact to begin with, the transphobes that then jump all over it, like thinking this is some sort of, woke or, trans promoting situation, where I don't think it's that at all. It's really just a matter of unfortunate circumstances of somebody possibly with a genetic abnormality. And I like that it has brought to light the idea of a lot of what does it mean to be a woman, or what are, clarifications of that are, like, especially for the transphobes who are always like, well, if they have a vagina, then they are a woman. If they have a penis, they're a man. Well, clearly that's wrong, because you can surgically do that anyway. And two, like, clearly intersex people might be born with both. Like, you can't judge somebody based on that. You can't judge them based solely on even chromosomes, apparently. Like Jeb Tan said, for specific aspects of their life, right? Like, so in sports, it should be much more about what kind of advantages the gender gives versus like what they have presented their life as. So mostly I'm just like here to say, stop hating on women just because they don't meet your expectations of what a woman should look like.
There are many reasons to hate on women, but that's not one of them, gang. Okay, that's not one of them. There's so many reasons.
Well, sometimes we can be bitches, honestly.
Yeah, true. And with that, where can people find you?
It's a shame that
Hold on, let her finish her
Yeah,
show.
sure.
Where can people find you, Bronwyn, if they want to find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter as Softcore Game Girl. Make sure, I've recently noticed that I have a copycat that does the L as a capital I instead of L. So make sure it's the right one. She's been I say she, it could potentially be a dude too, copying all my pictures and posting all that on there, which is delightful. You can also find me on Twitch, Softcore Gamer Girl. I mostly just stream me playing Baldur's Gate 1, but I've done some other games, and I then also upload those to a YouTube channel as well. So lots of fun that way.
Check her out, gang. Give her a follow. She took some time to rage with us today, and we appreciate that. Gang, thank you again. We're not ending the stream, but I am going to start transitioning and the show, gang. The show. Don't be weird.
You have time, Wick.
Yeah.
You have time.
And
come on.
Well, do you have any? If you guys want to hang out for another like 10 minutes?
Yeah. Do we know why the Twitter phrenologist didn't show up?
I don't know. He hasn't responded to my DMs.
Yeah, that stuff is dumb, man. I mean, the pragmatism is really what I would drive home here. Because, well, yeah, like technically in an athletic context, if there could be, if we want to get weirdly philosophical, there could be a woman that is a woman in every way, but she has a penis and no balls. And I would say she can compete because if she doesn't have elevated testosterone, doesn't have balls creating any, then she doesn't have an advantage in terms of sports. So that would be
philosophical.
Yeah, a woman with a dick would be a woman in sports. But then in bathrooms, right? It changes. Now I don't care if they've got I don't care if they have testosterone, but if they have a dick, that's the problem, right? Because we don't want little girls having to see dicks in the bathroom. So it's like the pragmatic definition does change, but it's the fact that you have like pseudo-religious grifters leading the narrative on it a lot of the times with like their fake objectivism, because it's objectivism that changes based on how they want it to or how they interpret the Bible or the Quran. It's fucking annoying because if you're just pragmatic about it, it's like no dicks in the bathroom, no balls in sports. If you have one or the other,
to be fair to that though, Jeb, I will say I haven't been to any female bathrooms, but I don't like. Usually they don't have urinals; it's just all stalls, right?
Yeah.
Like if Blair White has a cock, I'd rather she go to the female bathroom than the male bathroom. I think that would weird me out more to have Blair White next to me without a schlong twice the size of mine and just like start going at it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's potential, right? I guess I was more doing a crude summary of physical appearance is what matters more in the bathroom, whereas you could be completely like the hottest woman. You could be the Megan Fox with the dick and balls and still not be able to compete in sports if you have the high testosterone from the balls. Whereas, yeah, if you're Megan Fox with the dick in bathrooms and you're going into a stall, you probably belong in the women's bathroom because all that matters is how you look and your effort to pass, in my opinion. So it's okay to have pragmatic definitions that change and say that when you say woman out and about, you are speaking about one pragmatic definition, which is the definition of what you were born as.
My definition is whatever helps me win the argument with the person I'm having the argument with. That's how I define it. Frankly.
That's the issue of both sides of the argument believe that, except the left will admit they believe that, right? They'll say a woman is whatever you want it to be, whereas the right will say a different definition every argument, but then they'll say that is the definition and it is the only definition and it is the steadfast, consistent one. And it's like, well, then you can't change it as much as you do.
Do we have a separate topic? I'm stuttering my words. I'm having a Biden moment here, but a bit of a separate topic.
It comes with age. It's okay, Wick.
Since you guys are here for another couple minutes.
Well, I was going to say I'm grateful that Jeb Tan was here because I've learned a lot about the regulations of the IOC and that kind of stuff, which I like. I admit I didn't have a lot of information that way, so I really appreciate that.
We're all learning today, gang. Who's everyone's favorite and least favorite pick for Kamala Harris's VP? Lightning round. Go ahead, Chris. Favorite, least favorite.
Dude, I'm Canadian.
You again. You're not a person. You don't qualify. Okay. Chris, go.
Hold on. She doesn't qualify because she's Canadian. I'm Polish and I get to answer the question.
You're a VTuber. You're not a person.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, he hates Canadians. It's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. I like Walt, but I'm mostly going off of like vibes based. He just seems like a sort of like an endearing old granddad type, you know, like he always has these weird fucking candies in his pocket and they never come with a wrapper for some reason. In terms of the least favorite, now that Biden's dropped out and Kamala's taken over, I think I don't think I have a least favorite sort of VP pick. At least nothing comes to mind.
Fair enough. Jeb Tan, favorite, least favorite.
It depends. I mean, for me,
For you,
I
yes,
want her as a conservative. I want her to pick the worst possible. I want her to pick I want her to pick Killer Mike as her VP. But no, if I was a Democrat, I would probably say Mark Kelly. He's got the coolest resume of anybody in government, but also he doesn't take a governor off of a seat for you as a Democrat, which I think is important, especially when you're talking about Waltz and Shapiro, who have really high approval ratings. I think it's more valuable to have them staying in their position as governor. It's the same way I feel about Ron DeSantis and why I didn't want him to be Trump's VP pick. I think they provide more value there, continuing to serve as an example of like a Democrat done right to moderates. Rather than pulling them out of their seat and potentially having another Democrat replace them and fuck everything up that they worked for and increasing the odds that a Republican gets elected the next time. But nobody listen to anything I said. Do the opposite of that. Pick a really good governor or pick Killer Mike or somebody so that it's a breeze and we get more conservative policy, even though I dislike Trump quite a bit.
What do you think, Daniela?
I was unaware that Shapiro had higher approval ratings. I would assume that would be actually split the base, considering like his support for
specifically.
Yeah, just Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I mean, I think Shapiro was a bad pick, considering his history with Israel, for the base that she's trying to appeal to. But for someone like me, I think that would be a good pick. So I just hope that she sticks with that.
Okay, so I want to pick on that a bit because this is a pet peeve of mine. You know that Waltz has pictures of himself with Netanyahu. He's come out pro-Israel. He's called the protesters anti-Semitic. All the stuff that Shapiro, that the left is mad at Shapiro for doing, Waltz has done. But they only give Shapiro shit for it. And I'm going to let you guess what the difference between these two people is. I'm going to let you guess, okay?
Is it just the name? Is it in the name or what? What
it's
are you?
In the name. The name is alluding to it.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. I wasn't. From as far as I was concerned, she was pretty much settled on Shapiro. Or is that not accurate?
It's
we don't know
we
yet.
Don't know.
Technically,
yeah.
We just don't like
unless
officially
you got information
know.
I don't. Right, which is possible.
I don't have any info on the Democrats. I mean, I don't get info from them. So, but as far as I've heard, that's like the pick. I guess we'll just have to wait and see until it's officially announced.
From what I've seen, people are saying it's either going to be him or Waltz. I think the other ones are kind of out of the race, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah, either one I think would be a good pick for her. I think that would be really negative on a look on her campaign. So.
Okay. Well, and you're Canadian, so you don't want to answer, Bronwyn?
Well, I mean, I don't have a horse in the race, so you know, it's.
Well, fair enough. Okay, gang, I'm gonna let you guys go, and then I'm gonna get ready for my next show. Don't be strangers. See you guys later. Bye.
See you, everybody.
Good night.
Now that they're gone, gang. Now that they're gone. Okay, so I am going to move over to Streamlabs. It might take me a moment to get my stuff in order. So if I go black for a moment, forgive me. Black screen, to be clear. I'm not going to show up in blackface. So give me a second. let me get that started and done. And I will see you guys in like 5, well, hopefully only about 30 seconds. It should only take 30 seconds. But let's find out, okay? We'll find out together. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to exit out of here. Oh, see, don't panic. Don't panic, gang. Don't panic. I'm clicking the link. Okay, I am allowing him to use my camera and my microphone. Okay, it's coming up. Your name. We're going to change this to Wick TV. And then I'm going to update my OBS.
Little girl in the jacket.
Oh, give me a second, gang.
Wooden.
Hold on. I got to update my OBS here. 1 moment, please.
Hey, Wick, I see you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Window capture. Okay. Oh, there we are. Move this over. Okay it, and then let's adjust. You guys hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you. How much can you hear us?
I can hear one of you at least.
Draven, do you hear him?
My bad. I'm reviewing a music video.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I can hear everybody.
Beautiful. I think that's probably the best we're gonna get. This size-wise. Having to do this live. It's a minute. I just had a conversation on the Olympics controversy. I don't know if you guys have been following that.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit when we get on here, because it kind of bleeds over to our normal programming, which is wrestling, because Logan Paul fucking ran his cockwasher about that also, and it kind of
pissed you off
a little bit.
A little bit. Okay. Okay.
Save the wrestling part for tomorrow night, please.
Got you. Okay, I think
We'll talk about it a little bit. Talk about the boxing thing at least.
I think I'm
Boxing's not wrestling, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Here. But yeah.
So Wick, I'm the one that been chatting with you on Twitter. This is my co-host Draven Grimes.
Nice to meet you, sir.
And this is like I said, this is our non-wrestling show for the week. I'm a long-time practicing attorney, so I follow politics pretty closely. I'm a big First Amendment guy, big constitutionalist.
Beautiful.
So we'll talk. I'm sure we have a lot of things in common, but I'm kind of interested in getting, your opinion on a lot of the stuff, since you're mostly asking the questions.
Trying to. I appreciate being invited. I'm believe it or not often invited to these kinds of shows. So it's nice to be the one that's receiving the DMs rather than always sending them out. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a fan of a lot of the stuff you do, and we'll get into that. And
cool. Sounds good.
What the fuck?
We're
Are
live,
you still
by the way,
live
on
your
end.
side?
People can see and hear us. So keep the slurs to a minimum.
All right. Well, I'm gonna hop over to our starting soon screen, and I'll hop back at 8 p.m. when we do our thing.
Sounds good. It's about 5 minutes.
Yep.
In the meantime, I'm going to mute and talk to my audience for just a moment. So, okay, yeah, gang. I'm going to be on this Heel Shit podcast. They invited me, and I figured I'd accept. I'm not quite sure what we're going to be talking about. It is going to be political in nature. I am curious to see how it will go. Yeah, if you've got questions that you want me to ask these individuals, or if you have thoughts and you want to share them in chat, I will be looking at chat and reading chat a little bit throughout. But I'm mostly going to be focusing on whatever it is that they're talking about. They pitched it to me as they're going to be talking about political issues of the day, with all the craziness that's been happening with the Biden dropout, with the VP stakes that are happening when it comes to Kamala Harris, and I have lots of opinions on those. So I guess we'll see what it goes. Oh, thank you, by the way, for the super chat. I'm sorry I missed it during the stream. If you're still here off and topical, let me read that for you real quick. Can we discuss the fact that IBA president stated Imane had elevated T, but the IBA said in a statement they didn't test for T? It's all baseless outrage. I believe I alluded to that during the conversation, but yeah, it's that's my main problem is how much is just speculation about all this. It's just guesses. We're taking our what's it called? Biases, and we are giving them life with not enough information to really go on, but yeah. Okay, are they libs? I don't know, actually. They like me, so it could go either way. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Give me enough time to send a couple promos up.
So you guys mainly do boxing then? Or I'm sorry, wrestling?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, fair enough.
If we're not talking about it, we're doing it.
Oh yeah, you wrestlers?
Yep.
Awesome. You guys got stage names or?
Dark Chords is my brother over there. I'm Draven Grimes.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, we try not to use our real names on the podcast as much as possible because I don't know who the fuck is listening.
It's why that you all know me as Wick, and none of you know my real name, nor will you, right? It's just
Exactly.
there's a lot of crazy out there, and I have no interest in
Exactly. If y'all want to give us your opinion, there's the super chat. You get her email address. Express on social media. Express to the email.
Sure.
Don't show up at my front door. Especially during this hurricane.
I have, and this might sound weird, but I have played out scenarios in my head where some psychopath decides to knock on my door or something, and how I would handle it. Like realistically, I'd probably just call the cops. But I've thought about like, okay, depending on who shows up, we might be having different experiences, right? Like, there's a few people, if they showed up at my door, I might throw hands on sight. But
Right.
most people would be I'd be like, why are you here? That's weird of you to just show up unannounced. I'm gonna call the
Exactly.
cops.
Exactly.
That's it.
Like 9 times out of 10, I'll try to use my words because anytime I'm home, my wife and my kids are home.
Yeah.
But if it comes to the got to go to blows, my wife knows what's up.
Yeah, she gonna be.
Oh yeah.
I hope they're at least gonna videotape it for the rest of us, right? Because win or lose, you got to get that shit on camera and monetize it.
Oh, I have cameras all through my house. Don't worry about that. Matter of fact, I'm watching TV with my wife as we're talking right now.
Oh, what you guys watching?
I think she's watching Yellowstone or the prequel to it, whatever it's called.
I've never heard that. I've never seen that, I should say. Is it good? Worth a watch?
Not my cup of tea, but
Fair enough.
it's something we can have discussions about. So
Okay.
that's the main reason I watch it. I'm a huge fan of conversations, and she's a huge fan of watching TV. So we try to have a middle ground.
Meet in the middle. There you go.
All right. Oh.
Viewer discretion time. What up, Heel Faction? Welcome back to Heel Shit. Why do we call it that? Because bad guys do heel shit. I'm Dark Chords. That's Draven Grimes. This is Talking Shit, and today we've got a special guest in the house. You know him for moderating some of the funnest debates online. I'd like to welcome Wick TV to the show. How you doing, man?
Hey man, I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for reaching out. I'm curious to see how this is gonna go.
Outstanding. Well, we will get into politics right when we get back.
Beautiful.
All right. So, Wick, I've been communicating with you on Twitter for a while. It's nice to finally verbally meet you. How have you been doing, my friend?
So far so good, right? I just got back from a vacation. Actually, I went down to Florida, where my parents are from. I touched a lot of grass, did a lot of swimming, some outside stuff. Got away from all the discourse, quote unquote, as much as I could. Like I
Sure.
genuinely enjoy talking politics. I enjoy talking cultural issues and things like that. So I did dabble a little, but it's different to do as a hobby versus as something you get paid for. So that was nice. So I'm doing good. I'm
Absolutely.
refreshed. You got me. You got fresh Wick, okay? Unburdened by what has been, and I'm ready to go forward and get what we need done. So here we are.
All right. We're going to be talking about what has been in the world of politics for a couple of minutes. So I haven't really had any chatting with you of substance since the Trump assassination attempt. So I guess I want to start there. What was your reaction when you initially heard the news? And then we'll get into kind of how opinions have changed, since it happened.
I mean, anytime I hear of an assassination attempt on an elected official or someone who's running for candidacy or any kind of violence being actually perpetrated against them, it's shock. I understand that it does happen, unfortunately. Luckily, in America, at least, it's rare. But I was genuinely, when I first read the news, shock was the first emotion I felt. Like, oh God, what happened? And I immediately went in to kind of look to see what had occurred. There was a lot of noise at first, but generally, within a couple hours, it had narrowed down to we knew pretty much what had happened, what went down. I think that for me, it was pretty clearly unacceptable. There's no reason that it should have taken place. No one, under any circumstances, regardless of political leanings, should have shots taken at them or be threatened with violence or have violence perpetrated against them. Also interesting was the reaction from the online world and seeing everyone's initial thoughts kind of writ large and play out on Twitter live as we go. I felt that was genuinely kind of disturbing. I understand why people and I don't like Trump, to be clear. I'm not a MAGA guy. I'm voting against him. I voted against him in 2020. I'm voting against him again. I don't like him. I think that politics are worse because of him, but I don't understand why people think it's okay to joke or wish for him to have been physically killed or injured in such a case, just from both a moral level and a pragmatic level. These are both just anathema to me. Very something that's just against the core of who I am. But that's my thoughts. What are some of yours?
I'm kind of cynical. I think before any news came out, I think I had messaged you that, it looked like it was staged to me.
That was
that's
a take.
I obviously that was a hot take and that wasn't something serious. So, I had to kind of digest it because I heard about it on social media, where you hear everything, so I'm hearing, I'm seeing JD Vance immediately say, Biden ordered it. Like before the dude's body was cold, Vance had posted Biden ordered it, and just the disgusting discourse. And then obviously, we're familiar with what Destiny started talking about.
Yeah.
And, I'm a fan of Destiny. I would love to have him on a show sometime. That was a little, even for me, it was a little too far. But then when I kind of went back and digested it, it was it wasn't as bad as it's still perpetrated to be, I guess. Um, but I'm still puzzled by a few things. I'm puzzled by not only the Secret Service blunder. Obviously, it had to have been a just a complete blunder. I don't think the rhetoric on the right about the Secret Service purposely missing it. I think it was horrible that they dropped the ball there. I'm glad that the director resigned, but I don't know. It was kind of it's kind of surreal, and then it immediately for me my bit of sympathy that of course I sympathize with the gentleman who was actually struck and
Yeah, who got
murdered.
killed? Yes.
Absolutely, but the little bit of sympathy I had for Donald Trump quickly went away when it immediately turned combative. Um, and I guess looking back on it, has your opinion of not only why it happened, from whom it happened, and uh, the rhetoric since then, has it changed your opinion on anything? Have you developed, a
Sure.
stronger opinion one way or the other?
I understand what you're asking. I believe. I think that at the end of the day, it the rhetoric around it was always going to be terrible to a certain extent, from the extremes, from the fringes, from the edges. That's just how social media works. It amplifies the worst voices. There's always going to be crazy conspiracy theories, etc., etc., etc. That
Mm,
doesn't shock or surprise me or make me feel any sort of way, other than just kind of like, okay, that's just how it is. But for me, I don't I still don't know why this young man decided to take the shot, right?
mm,
There's so little we know, right? We have a lot of information, but not a lot of knowledge, if that makes
right.
sense. We know he was registered Republican. We know he donated to Act Blue. We know that he would argue with people in his colleges and school settings and things like that. Um, he was a weird dude from all accounts.
Sure.
So anyone saying for certain they know why this guy did it, I don't believe them. There's just not enough to go on. Maybe he just wanted to be famous. I don't know. Maybe he was a groiper and was mad that Trump had just announced Project 2025. I don't know. Maybe he was a crazy lefty who believed the hype from Vosh and other streamers. I don't know. And
Of
that's
course.
the key here, right? I don't know. As for has I changed my opinion? No. On when it comes to rhetoric around it, I my sympathy for someone, right, in such an event does not change based on how they react to being shot at that much. I mean, it can a little, but for the amount, for the most part, I think that someone who has just been violently attacked gets a minimum amount of sympathy from me, right? An unprovoked violent attack, to be clear, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not talking about someone who's like throwing hands and then they get
Oh, of
hands
course.
thrown
Yeah.
back at them, right? That's
Yeah.
different. But if you're getting shot at unprovoked, then I think you deserve a little sympathy. And I give you some grace for acting a little weird about it. If someone takes shots at me, I'm gonna act a little weird about it. I may take a few shots myself rhetorically. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
sure. Yeah.
So I get that. I also I still, when it comes to Destiny specifically, I'm still disappointed in his take there. I stand by that. I think his take was wrong, and I still do. But I like the guy in general, but I think that
Sure.
he was just in this whole tit for tat that he's talked about and other people have talked about. Like, well, they did it, we can do it too. That doesn't solve the issue. I
Mhm.
don't think it helps anything. I don't think it makes anything better. But that's my take. What do you guys think?
So, I guess going back to the would-be assassin,
Mm.
um, apparently some information has come out since then that uh, not only did he, highlight this particular rally in his calendar, but also the Democratic National Convention. It seemed to me, from how weird some of his internet searches were, how his classmates kind of described him, it felt to me like he was just done with the leadership of this country. And Trump was the closest and first public event, and if who knows what have happened, if he had gone to the DNC. Obviously the security to get into a building would be a little bit different, but I don't know. I definitely don't think it helped anything, and so much has happened since that shooting that's almost kind of completely diminished, even people even thinking about it, obviously, with the candidate switch.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, one thing I was definitely wrong on is I thought that this would be a pivotal issue going forward in the election. I thought we were still going to be talking about it. I thought it was going to dominate for a lot longer than it did. I was wrong on that. No one's talking about it anymore. We just, for whatever reason, have decided it doesn't matter, and we shrugged and we moved on.
Yeah, I found that kind of funny myself. Let's see. I mean, I guess we can move past this. And as we progress along in the politics timeline, obviously the next biggest thing that happened was the candidate switch.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a callback to you saying that you felt that the shooting was a pivotal point. When I saw that, I didn't feel as though anybody who was already not voting for Trump would have voted for him simply because of the assassination attempt. I don't think that was too much of a tide swinger one way or the other. But obviously, Biden dropping out and Harris being the presumed nominee really has shaken not only politics, but especially with unifying the Democratic Party. I mean, I'm 44 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been this unified since I've been paying attention to politics at all. So what are your thoughts on, because when I first heard that Biden was dropping out, I immediately thought it was over. I immediately thought the Democrats had fucked up and it was going to be, a Trump win. You lose the incumbent advantage. You lose the winning of the primary advantage. You lose so many things by him dropping out. But
name recognition. There's a few things, right? The fact that he'd beat Trump before, so we have a record here. So I still don't know if it was the right call. I know everyone's very happy that the polls seem to be doing better. Couple questions on that would be, is it going to be something that sustains itself? And what happens in November, right? Like, I understand that. Okay, let me put it this way. The fact that we're making decisions based on July polling is wild to me. It's wild to me that we are using information this early in the day to make any decisions on these things. Like, traditionally, polling has been wild and wonky with wild gaps and swings up until late October, that kind of time frame, when it really kind of narrows down from the horse race to be kind of more of an accurate reflection of things. And a lot can happen that can sway voters' opinions in October. They call it the October surprise, right? Something comes out and it has the potential to really impact the race. So I think that the early exuberance for Harris is understandable. I know it's a vibes-based thing, and I know polling seems to be showing that it is trending in her direction, but I do worry about the sustainability of that, and I also worry about the precedent that this sets. Because what we've basically done is we jumped off a cliff. We seem to have stuck the landing, and now you have a bunch of people saying, see, it's totally okay that we jumped off that cliff because nothing bad happened. which is a really bad way to make decisions going forward. It's a really bad way to look at the results of something. It's results-based thinking, and it doesn't work for me. I like procedural-based thinking, right? Where we can look at a procedure and see what is most likely to give us, over the most amount of times, a consistently good outcome. But when you take one-off events, which is pretty unprecedented, to be clear, of a candidate dropping out in July, a presidential candidate dropping out in July, and then having everything just go pitch perfect so far in the 2 to 3 weeks it's been. That is such a statistically unlikely series of events that I think we just need to count our lucky stars that it's gone that way, because there was so much potential for it to go so much worse. We're still not out of the woods. It could still go bad. We're talking about a more unified party. I don't know if I would say that. I still think that there are major divides, and you can see these in the Veep stakes, right? The VP sweepstakes going on right now between Kelly, Shapiro, Waltz, Whitmer, Bashir. There's several names that are being thrown out. I think it's down right now to Waltz and Shapiro. But even then, there's all the usual candidates saying, I won't vote for the blue ticket if it's this person who's the running mate. You had Mike from PA come out with, I will stop supporting the ticket if Shapiro is a running mate. And this is the same person, like, I'm not going to support Biden because Biden's a bad guy, right? Like, it just, at a certain point, why are we listening to these people? Because they want things to be just so, or they won't vote at all. They're fair weather friends. We shouldn't be taking them into account. That's my thoughts.
No, understood. I believe that. My opinion on polling is, to me, you're really only getting the opinion of people who are angry enough or people who are bored enough to sit down and take a poll. I don't know about you, and I don't know about any of the viewers, whatever, but I have never once, I've been an attorney for 17 years. I have never once kept on the phone when I found out it was a poll. And back when you used to go to the mall, I never once stopped and filled out a poll or a survey. Like, I don't know.
Maybe I'm weird. I would love to answer pollsters' questions, right? Like, you ask me my opinion on something. Well, that's why I'm a streamer, right? If you ask me my opinion on something, boy, have I got opinions for you. They may not be founded. They may not be smart opinions, but oh my God, do I have opinions? And let me tell you, I'll let you know about them. So I've just never been contacted for a poll.
When's the last time you answered a political phone call?
I don't think I've ever had, except for people asking me for money. I don't think anyone's ever called me and been like, hey, Wick, what do you think of is the most important issue to you in this election? I've never had that happen in my 40 years of life.
Wow. I guess maybe I'm just one of the lucky few. I don't know.
Demographics, man. You fit the demographics.
I guess so. Just to get off politics for a minute, you had a little vacation down here in Florida. Was that a good time?
I enjoyed it. I just didn't do much in terms of entertainment, but the fact that I was able to just stay with my family, read some books, not be so online, swim, get out in the sun a little bit, it's nice. I think we underestimate the value of just taking the phone, putting it down for a day, and just not touching it. I wish more people would do that. We'd live in better lives if we just did that. That one simple thing. Not right now, gang, since you're all watching us, right? You continue to watch a podcast, continue to watch the show. But once that's done, put the phones down. Go out and talk to people. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, my wife is similar age as me, and I guess it's an old meme at this point, but sometimes you really do wonder how we left the house with no tether. Like, You don't know if they're coming back or not, really.
Do
You
you
don't know
remember
what's
trying
happened
to
to them.
find places without GPS, right?
Oh, my God.
Directions, having to write them down on a napkin or something? Crazy.
Yeah.
MapQuest.
Yeah.
MapQuest
was a
putting out
beautiful
the
thing when that
YouTube
came
stuff.
out.
Yeah. No, that was
Yes.
a godsend. But like even before that, I remember driving around in New Jersey, where I was at the time. I didn't have internet at the time, and I would just follow the signs and sometimes stop at a gas station and have to ask for specific directions.
Yep, 100%.
Crazy.
It's crazy. Like I have two daughters, and one just turned 16, and the other one's just turned 15. So they're gonna just turned 14. So they're both gonna be driving soon, and it hits me again. Like, how did my mom let me jump in a car with no way of knowing whether if I'm dead on the side of the road, and just trusted that shit was gonna turn out right? Like, I don't get it, but glad she did.
I don't know. I've rode with you a couple times. She could have taught you better. Like what a damn brake is.
Hey man,
brakes are for people without conviction. Okay, all gas, no brakes. Make a decision, you stick to it. Okay.
You
worst
buy a
is
fast
you're going.
Car. What the hell am I supposed to do with it?
This is it
Keep
frustrates
it under
me.
120. Keep it under 120. That's what I need you to do, especially at 1 o'clock in the morning on the way back from Alabama.
All right, man. All right,
family
I'll take that into consideration.
No, I'm talking about the people who look. I've ridden with people, and this frustrates me. It's a pet peeve. You're going to the light. You're just driving. You see it change yellow. Make a decision right then whether you keep going or you stop. Don't try to second guess it with a stop, start. Make a choice. That's all I'm asking.
Pull the fucking trigger, man. You're killing all of us back here.
It frustrates me a lot.
Yes. So do you have kids? Anything?
No kids. I don't talk about my family stuff, right? For same reasons I don't give out my name, things like that.
Sure.
I just keep it to my opinions rather than my life. I will say though, growing up, I did have a family. I was born and raised religious, right? And so they kept tabs on me even without a phone. But what that looked like back in the day was a curfew. I had to be home at a certain time or there would be consequences, right? And as I grew up, at first back in the day, I thought, oh, this is fascism, right? It's fascism. they're authoritarianly keeping me in the house. But as I understand it today, as a grown-ass adult, especially in a world where I didn't have a cell phone growing up, they wanted me to be at a certain home at a certain time, so they knew where I was and that I was safe, and they didn't have to worry or panic that I might be hurt. Now, today with a cell phone, it's a little easier, and people could check in much easier. They can have these programs that even track your location, as I understand it, right? So they can just know where you are, which has some privacy issues, but I understand it, right? So back in the day, there were just ways we did it that would feel weird and alien to those growing up today. But back then, there's good reasons that we performed the way that we did and we acted the way that we did. And I think that curfews back in the day made a lot of sense. But yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yep. Hey, thank you, Daisy. I didn't even notice. Sorry, we're mid-conversation here. No disrespect intended. I noticed a chat that says just "fuck you, bro." Like, yes, I missed
which bro? Like, there's 3 of us, but yeah.
No.
Right. Probably the quiet one.
Probably the quiet one.
I'll take all the fuck yous tonight. I'll take them.
Yes. Pile the fucks on Driven. All right. So, but yeah, no, it's a whole new world with kids. Like I like you. I was like, really, I got to be home at this time. My buddy gets to stay out until this time. And they're like, well, I ain't your buddy's mama.
Pretty much.
All right. So, all right. So, what have you had any? Have you moderated any debates recently that you've particularly enjoyed?
All my shows are great, and I love them all equal. Now, I thought today's show was actually pretty good. We talked a little bit about the Olympic controversy with the Olympic women's boxer, and I still can't pronounce her name right, Imane Khelif, and all the rip roaring for that. That was interesting. As a moderator, one of the biggest issues that I have for setting up a show is, will my guests actually show up? Right? That is a thing that, unfortunately, I've been stood up a few times.
Yeah.
And especially with people who I have that are newer, that I don't really have a lot of record of showing up on time, it can be a little frustrating and nerve-wracking. We had one guy not show up today. Luckily, I had a replacement. But, yeah, that's for me, one of the biggest problems of doing these shows is, regardless of the topic, there will be times when I just have to replace a guest last minute, and it's just frustrating. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of multi-guest shows. It's generally just the two of us, but I think we've gotten to the point where we tag team off each other so much that if someone doesn't show up, it's probably a better show anyway.
Well, you guys have built-in co-hosts, right? Your brothers, so it works out. I don't got any of that. I'm solo doloing it out here, right?
Yeah. Actually, we're not brothers.
Oh, I thought.
No, we
get
that
all the time.
All the time.
My bad.
We're good. We're actually we look relatively similar. We're both giant bald guys. But we met in because we're both professional wrestlers, and we formed a tag team.
Oh, like spiritual brothers, because you had mentioned driving with him when you were younger and things like that, so I made all sorts of assumptions, but carry on.
Yeah, no. But yeah, so that's kind of what it's about. But yeah, no, I don't envy you, because I know you've had what's the most members in a show that you've had? How many guests?
What, in an official show or at after hours call in?
An official show.
An official show, the most I've had are 8.
Okay.
Not including me. I used to do that as the standard, but I quickly changed that to 6 as my standard, and now I do 4 to 6.
Better.
4 to 6 is kind of my sweet spot here. Yeah.
Shit. We can barely handle 4.
Man, 8 is the reason I did 8 at first was because I wanted to give everyone a chance who wanted, as many people as possible. The benefits to that were networking. I got to network with more people. I got more eyes on me because their audiences would also watch. But there's some obvious cons to that format as well. The chaos of it, the fact that it would make there would be people who just wouldn't get to say almost anything. The quieter people would be looked over. All these things. It was a problem. It was hard sometimes for the audience to understand who was talking and what was going on. It was just a lot. I found out that it wasn't as enjoyable for the people who would regularly watch me as smaller formats were. So that's why I changed it.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah, sorry, I'm just looking at
take your time, man.
All the stats here.
I'm just a river. I'm going with the flows. Your guys' is rodeo. I'm just trying to hang
like
on.
Water.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm running the production and all the socials and everything right here. Sometimes I get a little twisted up. So, something that turned out to be just as funny as I was expecting it to be. Trump's appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists.
I saw it.
Whoever booked this for him should be terminated immediately.
You think so? You want a hot take?
Please.
I don't think it was as bad as for him as a lot of people are saying. For Democrats, obviously, for people who don't like Trump, we laughed at him because he's a laughable figure. We thought it was silly. But for people who are still undecided or Trump voters, I don't think it was that bad. I know that's a hot take because I don't think he lost anything from that appearance, and he did shore up some credentials. Now, that said, there are some specific answers he gave during that I think were wild, that I think is going to hurt him if we can capitalize them. One of the things that he said, I believe it was at this conference, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. One of he was asked about J.D. Vance as a running mate, and he was asked with the memes around him and his historically low approval rating, what are your thoughts, right? Do you regret picking J.D. Vance? I think the specific question is J.D. Vance ready for the job? I believe that was the specific question. His answer was, well, the vice presidential pick doesn't really matter usually in a presidential race. So
yeah,
that was just to me, an insane answer for several reasons. One, it's the first decision or one of the earliest decisions a presidential candidate can make to signal how they are going to govern, and it has constitutionally mandated what's the word? Consequences. That's it. Yeah, it's constitutionally mandated consequences for what happens because of your vice presidential pick. They can break ties in the Senate, and should you be unable to govern, they are next in line to govern. It's immensely consequential in terms of governing. In terms of the race, while yes, there are examples of presidential candidates who have no effect on the race, there are examples of vice presidential candidates that have, arguably at least, tanked their Sarah Palin, I think, is probably the biggest example of that. The most clear-cut example that we can find, recent, I should say, that just did not do well for them at all. But yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know. Sorry. I don't know if it's necessarily going to hurt him with his current voters.
Yeah.
I think it opened the eyes of some people who, weren't quite, saying, if character wasn't as big of a deal in this race, I think that shined a new light on a character flaw. And I think he went there and just gave Kamala so much ammunition, so much advertising ammunitions. I just think it might not have been a bad look for him losing voters that are already committed to voting for him, but I think it does damage beyond that.
The problem with Trump is we say this, and I remember 2016, everyone in 2015 leading up to it, everyone was sure, oh, this amount of bullshit that he just said, this is it. This is what's going to get him, okay? This is what's going to make him unelectable. This is what's going to make everyone turn against him. This is what's going to turn off the undecided independent voters, right? When he mocked the disabled reporter, when he alluded to the Mexican illegal immigrants being a rapist, right? When he what did he say about John McCain? I like people who weren't captured, or things like that. I forget the exact wording.
He was only a war hero because he was captured.
Yeah,
I like people who aren't captured.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff he said that everyone thinks this is what's going to give us the ammunition we need. Here's the thing about Trump, and this is really unique to him in a lot of ways. He has Teflon Don is what they call him. He's the criticism against him feeds into the narrative that he's tried to build, that the deep state is out to get him, that the institutions of failed America have targeted him and are out to make sure that he never becomes president or never becomes president again. And they are the enemy. The media is the enemy. And the media being the enemy isn't new to Trump, to be clear. This has been a Republican talking point since Reagan, for example. But when it comes to the modern political era, I think that I don't think it's going to, and I'll just say this, I don't think what he says matters at all. That's not what anyone's going to judge him on. Like, I don't know why he won't debate Kamala in September, right? I know that he's doing wishy-washy back and forth whether he'll go on out. Because, again, he lost every debate to Clinton. Every single debate he had with Hillary Clinton, he lost pretty clearly. It did not matter. What he says does not matter. It's the image that he's trying to convey. And two things. The fact that he appoints judges that are straight from the Heritage Foundation's most wanted list that are going to do things like overturn Roe v. Wade. Evangelicals and other kind of very conservative voters love that, and they will excuse a lot to get that. And the second is, again, he's built up a narrative where any attack against him just feeds into what he's been saying to his core constituency of people who are, and his core constituency, to be frank, are people who feel that the American system is broken fundamentally, that they no longer have a voice, no longer have a say, and like Michael Moore said in 2016, he is a firebomb that is being thrown into the electorate, thrown into the system because they want him to break it. They want him to blow it up. They don't. They feel failed and they want it gone. And so, again, I don't think what he says fucking matters.
I actually think it does matter, but not how people would hope it matters. I think it matters because people who are going to vote for Trump, I think they revel in it. They love it. It's a feature that they like about him. His unprofessionalism, his rhetoric, everything. They, for some reason, it's like pigs in slop, man. They just eat that shit up. And I don't know. I think to me personally, it's kind of sad that, one, we've gotten to the point where so many people feel disenfranchised enough to just blindly follow this guy. But it's also sad that we still have so many people in this country that think like Donald Trump.
It's one of those things where, like, the system for a lot of people has failed. It's not a talking point. It just has. There are a lot of people, especially in rural America, who do feel like that they're being talked over, who they feel like they're been misled, they lied to, frankly, and they just are sick of it. Now, again, I think that they're being taken advantage of. I think that above all, Trump is a con man who is basically swindling them and claiming he cares about them, and he does not. But their pain is real, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to address it. So
yeah. I don't know. What do you feel about the strategy that has been employed by the Trump campaign against Kamala up to this point? It seems like a lot of race baiting. It sounds like a lot of non-substantive arguments, non-substantive critiques.
my first question would be, what strategy? It doesn't seem like they have one. I don't think that they were expecting this outcome. I don't think they were prepped for it or prepared for it at all. And I think they're throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. I don't think anything has stuck yet. We're early. It's early August. Please don't expect that to be the case for the rest of the campaign. I would be delighted if it was,
Sure.
but I'm going to assume at least some level of competence on their part, and they'll get their act together and find a through line that sticks. I do think that to the race baiting and all that, I think that is unfortunately a portion of the electorate. We saw this on the left when it came to Israeli and Jewish individuals, and we're seeing that also with Israeli and Jewish individuals on the right, but also with black individuals and other such things, DEI hires, etc. Right? Like, I think that's just a unfortunate facet of culture. So,
Draven, turn your mic down. I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Well, I don't want to take a whole ton of your time up. I just kind of want to get your opinion on a few of these things. And what do you got going on for the rest of the night?
man, after this, I'll probably just watch some TV. I saw the House of the Dragons season finale. I wasn't impressed. I don't know if you guys watched that. But,
I loved Game of Thrones. I haven't really started watching House of the Dragons. But I didn't watch Game of Thrones until the 8th season of Game of Thrones. So
what a time to get into it. I read the books, the Game of Thrones, the books when they came out. I've been a fan for a while. I did watch the series, not from season 1, but I watched it after a couple seasons. I was staying away from it at first because I didn't want it to taint my impressions of the book, but I kept hearing good things about it, so I was like, yeah, I'll see what the I'll see how this story translates into the serial medium. It was fine. I enjoyed it a lot. I think it was a good story. But yeah, the last couple seasons were. Let's not talk about them. House of the Dragons. I think the first season was very good. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a hit for me, top to bottom. The second season was kind of slow. It feels transitional, like it's basically trying to connect to. It feels like filler. It feels like they're putting in some background work to get to the actual events that they'd like to show, but that's not going to come till season 3. I was overall disappointed with the season finale of second season of House of Dragons, but here we are. So,
well, when I say I didn't start watching it until season 8, I didn't like jump in at season 8. Like I heard it was coming to an end, and I think me and my wife watched all 7.5 episodes up to that point in like a week. Like
binging it. Yeah, look, I love one of the things that I love about the new. There's a lot to hate about how we do media nowadays. A lot of remakes, a lot of people that just the stories just aren't as good. They're not as original. However, one of the things from streaming services that has been a godsend is releasing the whole season at once.
God, yes.
I don't want to. Let me watch it on my time. I don't want to have to wait. If a story's good, I want to keep going, right?
Yeah, especially the problem with me is if I like find something I've fallen in love with. Like there was a wrestling show on Netflix called Glow, and it was a fictionalized representation of a glamour-based women's wrestling promotion.
Okay.
Back in the early 80s. And I put it off. Finally watched the first season. I watched the first season right up until the second season dropped. And then I blew through the second season like quickly, and then I was so pissed off there was nothing else for another year.
Oh.
Like that's the good and the bad of dropping it all at once. Is that
discipline, my friend, discipline? Okay,
yeah.
if you need to make it last, don't just shove the whole pizza into your face at once. Take it slice by slice, buddy. But for those of us who don't mind, right, shoving a whole pizza into one's face, okay.
I love it, but it's a blessing and a curse to me because like we watch the Chicago dramas, Chicago Med, stuff like that, and yeah, it sucks that you can't immediately go into the next episode, but you've got 24 weeks of episodes before you have to have that 3, 4, 5 months off. Sucks when you have to wait a whole year for your favorite show to come back on.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a fan of yours in our chat who's also a fan of professional wrestling. So welcome. His name is No Pants Kyle.
Cool. Glad he's
So thank you for getting us a new wrestling podcast fan. Appreciate that very much. So yeah, no, we appreciate you joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We've got a few more minutes left on the show, but I've kind of run out of the prepared topics to discuss with you. So we'll let you go. But I really appreciate it. I hope we can have you back. I hope you felt it was worth your time to do.
I'm always happy to come on other people's shows. You guys were generous. I thought that was an interesting conversation. And if you're watching this, gang, and you're thinking about subscribing to these guys, you should definitely do it. You should follow their podcast, all that. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it. You can find us pretty much every social media at Heel Shit Podcast. You can all of our streaming services is Heel Shit Podcast except Twitch, and that's Heel Shit Pod. Search our audio podcast up on any of your major podcast outlets. Just search Heel Shit Podcast. We've got 120 episodes up. We've been doing the audio podcast about a year and a half, and just having a good time doing it.
Cool.
Hoping to have more guests as we move forward. Doing nothing but politics on this Monday night show until the election. So by all means, anytime you want to hop on, if there's a major, race shattering event, love to have you back on and discuss it.
Who knows? There might be with how we're going, right? Assassination attempt, candidate dropout. What's coming next? Alien invasion? I don't know. We'll find out.
All right. Well, I appreciate it very much. Guys, if you're just our fans and you're interested in, this wasn't really a debate, it was more of a conversation, but he's got some fiery debates on his channel. So go check him out. It's Wick TV on all of the outlets. And thank you very much, man. Hope to have you back soon.
No problem. See you guys later. Bye-bye. Yeah. What a show, gang. What a show. Hold on. Let me adjust the screen again. Let me get rid of this. Boop, 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 boop. Boop. Let me go back to Discord. Give me a second, please. I don't got much. I just want to give you guys the outro, right? The basic, the basic stuff. Okay. Am I back? Can you see me? Am I good to go? I think I am. I think I'm here. Okay, what did you guys think? Did you guys enjoy the conversations? Did you guys enjoy the show? Did you have fun? I think that's the most important thing. Did you all have fun? I hope you did. I hope you enjoyed the conversation on the Olympic boxer in women's sports, as well as all those two fine gentlemen who talk just about life in general and political involvement. Good stuff. Tomorrow, Kamala Harris will be announcing her vice presidential pick. Some evidence to suggest it's Waltz. Some evidence to suggest it's Shapiro. Either way, I'll be covering it live on Wick TV tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. I will be going live, and I will be talking with all and sundry about the pros and cons of Kamala's pick. I'm hoping also to hear from conservative voices on what they think it means. I'd love to have you guys on. It's going to be kind of like a informal show. People will come in, they'll drop out, they'll drop in, talk for a few minutes, right? Kind of like a call-in show, sort of. But yeah, it'll be fun. $5 from Fat Surprise says fun double feature. Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. $2 from Soyaddle. Catch me up. Do low T men get to hit women? I get to hit you. Does that make you a woman? Maybe. But Until next time, gang, where are we going? Who's streaming still? We can go to Prime Kai. You guys know where to raid Prime Kai? Say hi. Oh, Lactoid's live too. Well, they're probably on the same show, honestly. Let's raid Prime Kai. And I will see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Check me out. Boom, boom. Bye-bye.